saying we have offers that are higher, it's up to, you wanna, put in a second offer.
Okay, so.
Would that be smart to do or not so smart to do? If you're trying to get the best of the best, right?
Well, the best of the best is just not price. Remember, we talked
Yeah,
about that
no, I
yesterday.
know. Yeah.
It's all the other terms and conditions.
An offer, but would it make sense for the listing agent, if you're listing, to go back to the one that was 500 and say,
Okay, so you're talking two different things.
okay,
You said, do I have an obligation to go back to the other agents?
No, you don't have an
obligation
obligation. I
to go back to
understand
the
that.
other agents.
Right.
Now your question is, do I have an obligation to go back to the lowest one, or would it be a good strategy to go back to the lowest one and tell the lowest one that we
all
have?
of them up to 570, up to go back to, would it be a marketing, not marketing,
Ooh.
would it be good to do that, just to say, look, we've got as high as 570, would your client,
Okay, you're broaching a subject which is often known as highest and best.
yes,
I can't tell you how many times I've said, please do not use the terms highest and best. There are already cases in court where consumers are suing realtors and brokerages related to the use of the terms highest and best. What we have said, and our policy is, if you are in a multiple offer situation as the listing associate,
right,
your responsibility is to ensure that all people know that you are in a multiple offer situation.
right,
The listing agreement gives you the right to tell all individuals that you are in a multiple offer situation. There are two things that must occur for you to disclose that you're in a multiple offer situation. One, the seller must agree to allow you to tell other people that you're in a multiple offer situation.
Okay.
Two, the other realtor must ask. So if I'm in a multiple offer situation and you don't ask me if it's multiple offers, I have no obligation to tell you. But our policy is that when you are in a multiple offer situation, you disclose. So our policy is, when you are in a multiple offer situation, you disclose to all parties. We've given you many suggestions on how to do that. You can do that through showing time. You can send an email to all parties indicating that it's a multiple offer situation. What you also want to do is, when you are in a multiple offer situation, is make sure that everybody has the opportunity to adjust or change their terms and conditions. So what we ask you to do is, please notify all parties that it's a multiple offer situation, put the multiple offer disclosure in MLS under documents, and offer to everyone a certain date and time that your seller will review all offers. And then at that cutoff period that you send out to all to all agents that have made offers, that's when they have to make any changes or submit adjustments to their offers or leave their offers the way that they are. Please don't ever ask for highest and best. Just say, we're meeting on Sunday at 4 o'clock. If you'll have any changes that you would like to make to your offers to me by Sunday at noon, I will present all offers at Sunday at 4. You're not asking a buyer to go beyond their means. You're not asking a buyer to be pushed to a particular level. If the associate working with the buyer says, you need your highest and best, that's on them. That's not on you. You need to make sure that what you're doing is making sure that everyone has an opportunity and no one feels that they are pushed beyond their means. And that's what's happening right now, is consumers are getting into houses that they paid $20,000, $30,000, $70,000, $100,000 more than asking price because someone said to them, you need to make your highest and best. Now they're in the home, all of the equity has been used in overpaying for the property, and they're forced to sell. They lost their job and have to move. The company has transferred them. Family reasons have taken them out of the area, and they can no longer sell the house for what they owe. And their position is, I was told to make my highest and best offer, and I did. And while I could afford it, it was not what I wanted to do, but I felt I had to do it to get the house. So who are they going back to? They're going back to the realtor and they're going back to the brokerage saying, you forced me by making me feel that I wasn't being competitive to make my highest and best offer. I used up all my funds. Whether they want to take responsibility or not is a whole nother question. But this is a business. So when someone feels that they've been wronged, where do they go?
So number one, the seller has to agree to divulging the other offers, right?
Seller has to agree to allow you to share that it's a multiple offer situation.
Yeah.
They do that in the listing agreement. It's already
Oh,
written
it's
into
already
the-
in there.
It's already in.
Oh, it's already in there, okay. And the other realtor has to reach out to you
And ask.
and ask, because that's number two. I didn't realize that.
I
Oh.
thought you could just find MLS. So she said another realtor needs to reach out to you. What do you mean by that?
So when you have multiple offers, you as the listing associate have no obligation to tell everyone that it's a multiple offer situation. You have
But
no
if you do,
obligation to do
everybody
it.
needs to have a fair chance. That's
Correct.
what I mean. Okay.
So the two things that have to occur in order for you to be responsible to tell someone that it's a multiple offer situation is, one, the seller has to give me permission. And the seller gives me permission in the listing agreement,
on this contract.
in this contract.
So once it's signed,
That's already one.
Yeah, that's one.
The only other contingency is that the other agent has to ask, is this a multiple offer situation?
If they don't ask, you can't just like spam them and
I
say it's
see what you're
multiple
saying.
offers, is that what you
He's
mean?
saying,
What I mean is,
okay,
the rules say, in order for me to be obligated to tell you that we're in a multiple offer situation, the seller has to give me permission and you have to ask me.
so basically.
Otherwise, you're not obligated.
Otherwise, I'm not obligated.
But if they ask, you must be honest.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So basically, if you have a different strategy, you want to like look at both offers instead of asking for the highest and best.
Never highest and best.
Right, instead of doing.
I saw that a lot,
though.
though.
Unless the agent asks you, are you doing highest? Are you have multiple offers?
Right.
That makes
So you
sense.
don't have an obligation to tell the agent that you have multiple offers unless the agent asks. Our policy is, when you get multiple offers, you tell everybody.
Exactly. You disclose it, find out MLS, it'll be there. But
Right,
if you
so
don't want to,
You disclose it in MLS in private remarks.
that makes sense.
You put the multiple offer disclosure in the documents. You set a date and a time for everyone to submit any changes to current offers, or anyone who might be interested in an offer, they need to have it in by a certain time. You set the time to meet with the seller, and then you formulate your meeting, and you reach back out to every single person. And when you reach back out, you'd be reaching back out to say, congratulations, the seller has selected your offer to move forward and go under contract. And to everyone else, a good policy is to reach out to all of them, one via email, and if you don't have too many, reach out via phone. But to say, thank you for your offer, there were X number of offers, we had a range between X and Y. I'm sorry that we weren't able to bring it together for your buyer. I hope that we'll have an opportunity to work together in the future. You should always close the circle, be respectful.
I
and-
agree with that.
And
yeah.
offer opportunities.
That's just out of respect when you actually have to do it.
There's no rule that says you have to do it. Our policy is that you do it.
Okay.
Your policy is, okay, multiple offers. There is a document then, you're saying that,
Called the multiple offer disclosure.
yeah, and that's in our stuff?
It's in app files.
Yeah.
I think that was a pretty good discussion. You know, I,
Well,
I
see,
didn't know how many people could
that
say
would
it,
happen
you know.
to you in this
Yeah,
kind of
absolutely.
market.
That would happen. It would.
Yes.
Well, I mean, we're in a somewhat litigious society. So you have to be careful not only what you say, but what you do. You
God,
have to make
everybody's
sure that
saying
your
highest
actions
and
and
best.
words match each other. I understand that everyone's saying it. And I will tell you that people in our company say it. I'm always gonna train that you never say it.
Okay, and that's good to know.
Did you want to say something?
I was just gonna say that I noticed, like you were saying where to put, that there's multiple offers, I'm always seeing it, like, they'll edit the listing where the public remarks.
You're right.
And putting it multiple offers, submit all offers by,
That should always be in private remarks,
really,
always in private.
Oh, I see, I know that.
all the time.
You just have to put it over the bottom. So
It's at the top
Right.
usually if they added it at that, you know,
Yeah, just before all the words about the.
right, just like where they might say open house, like they'll just added it. Is that bad?
It's not against MLS rules.
Okay.
The things that are against MLS rules would be any codes to lock boxes, any codes to the gate, any alarm codes, any door codes. Those should never be in public remarks. No websites either. You good?
Yeah. Well, that was good to know too.
All right, so we're gonna jump back to the listing agreement, paragraph 3, page 2. I promise we'll be okay. So we start to lay out the terms of the contract that exists between the brokerage and the seller. One of the first terms that you want to discuss is the listing price. This price should always be selected by the seller. It should hopefully fall within the range that you've recommended in your CMA, but we know that the market may shift how that perception is, and a seller may want to push a listing price. I shared that I wouldn't list a property that was more than 5% over the max value in my range, but this market, I would probably be inclined to adjust my percentage.
Two.
Right now, I would really have to look at the market.
Okay.
I mean, I would probably remove the percentage cap and then discuss with the seller what the opportunities are. What I think we need to do, though, is be more realistic at setting up the expectations for our sellers. So if they want to be here and we're saying we should be here, how do we manage that gap?
Yeah.
Just like a buyer is managing an appraisal gap, we have to manage a listing gap to some degree.
Yeah.
My fear would be that, you know, it would make you look, the property and you as an agent with the days on the market, and then they would also be feeling like, well, I really wanted to sell at, you know, $5,000 or $50,000 more than what we discussed. So then you're out of the deal. You're only making yourself look bad, and no post, you know, transaction has happened. So then you just have to, you're basically fired, and your portfolio of previous properties don't look as good.
So,
Is that why you hit your cap?
I put my cap because I want to have integrity in my business. Again, in this market, I would probably remove my percentage cap, but if I'm taking a listing and I know it's overpriced, I don't know which is worse for your reputation, to have a listing that sits out there over an extended period of time and doesn't sell, or not taking the listing.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
possibly it might not appraise then too. So then you've got most people coming in with financing will have that huge gap, and that might be a mess, you know?
Right, but then you have an opportunity at least to demonstrate your skills in negotiation and opportunity to talk about what their options are and demonstrate your knowledge of how the market can work. Then, if the buyer and seller can't come to an agreement on a price, you either continue to market the listing or you've just given yourself support to reduce the price of the property.
Correct, yeah.
I think that when we have a large gap between what we believe the price should be and what the seller believes the price should be, there are lots of options. So if we're at a great differential, I might write into the listing agreement automatic price reductions
Every 2
over
weeks.
a certain period of time.
Yeah,
I might be willing to pay half or 100% of an appraisal so that we get a third party out there to give us an idea of what they believe the value of the property is to prove me
Oh.
wrong.
okay.
So I might negotiate with the seller and say, look, we have a difference of opinion and I'm okay being wrong, but I need you to prove me wrong. So
I-
here's what I'm willing to do.
I think that would be
I'll
smart.
pay for an appraisal, and if it comes more towards what I believe, we'll split it. If it comes more towards what you believe, I'll eat the price.
Yeah, and, cause I think what does present poorly is when you see a minus, you know, in MLS where suddenly it's a price drop, and then a price drop. Ooh, that doesn't look good.
But we don't know why. See, I don't know that it doesn't look good.
To me, it doesn't look good.
Well,
Just
I
as
think-
if I were a consumer.
okay,
I
so
see.
you're looking from consumer eyes.
Yes.
I think that consumers in this market wonder why that's happening, but I think the same thing can be said when a house goes on the market, off the market, on the market, off the market, on the market.
Well, that's
So-
true too, but when you start saying dropped by 50,000 or 25,000 or something, you kind of, it makes you double think that there's then you, I don't know, bid even less than that. So I think it sets you up to be kind of in trouble a little bit with the listing.
Okay,
That's just my opinion.
with the listing as the listing associate?
No, just as a consumer looking at that, I would say, ooh, they've already dropped, so maybe I can, there's something going on here, so maybe I can even go lower with my offer.
Great,
That would be the first thing I would think.
great. Most consumers would.
Yeah.
So submit an offer. Your goal as the listing associate is to get everybody together. So
Yeah,
if
but
the
I-
perception of making price adjustments is that the seller may be willing to take more, the only way the consumer's gonna know is if they make an offer. If the seller's not willing to take what they are offering, then you're at least in negotiation and you've generated an offer for the seller.
I get that, but you know how you said every 2 weeks you're getting a minus, drop. That seems.
They can predict, okay, so I know you're gonna drop again in like about 3 days, so let me beat you to that plus a little bit more and see how
Plus
we
that
do.
shows up on the.
Great. But what you've done is what you're supposed to do. You've generated an offer for your seller.
Yeah,
The seller doesn't have to take what the offer is.
and they can always counter and say, no, I'm gonna go up there. Yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
Or if it's the predictive element that you mentioned, then great. Wait 2 weeks. But now what if someone comes in before you?
You know, I like this strategy with explain that appraisal or you pay for appraisal. What are the customers' response to that when you offer?
It depends on their motivation. If their motivation is bottom line dollar, then sometimes they're like, no, I just really want to go ahead and put it up at X price. And then you have to make a decision, do you want to take it or not? Maybe at that point you take a short listing. So that even if your sign is out there for the entire listing period of 3 to 4 months, then at least it comes off, people think it's sold. Rather than
Oh,
6 months,
That's right.
where people are like, well, it obviously didn't sell.
Yeah, that's right.
Or maybe after 2 months on an overpriced listing, you take your sign out of the yard. But it stays in MLS.
Actually, that's true because.
I mean, you have to think about perception. You have to think
Perception.
about reputation.
Right.
Maybe you take it as a 4-month listing, and after 2 months, your seller's not being reasonable, either based on showings, based on price adjustments, based on preparation, and you say, guess what? I'm firing you.
Mhm.
I don't know. Each
Is it legal to take out your sign out of the yard while you're still representing it?
sure.
Is nothing in the agreement that says you have to keep the sign there?
There's a portion that talks about broker's responsibility, and one of the pieces is to, hey guys, one of the pieces is that we will put a sign in the yard if acceptable. So that means based on HOA guidelines or requirements or any of those kinds of things, but we can also choose to take a sign out of a yard, absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
See, this is why I get what you were asking earlier about what's the steps A, B, C, D. And it's great that you think that way, but what ends up happening is you go A, B, 1, 2, 3,
Yeah.
4, C, 1, 2, 3, and sometimes you can't predict. So you have to have your process. That's why we say buyer consult and seller consult, and then you have to be willing to almost bob and weave. You know, it's like
Oh, I get that.
it's like doing a dance.
I get that, but
know?
you still have to have certain things in place, like signage. Well, if you decide to have a sign, but I know those variables, but there's certain things you have to do, like right off the bat when you get a listing.
Well, hold on. There's nothing you have to do when you get a listing. There's
Well,
certain
Photos, right?
we as a company say you should always have professional photos.
Yeah, MLS, you have to enter into MLS.
MLS says you must have at least one photo.
Right.
So if you choose to only do one photo
We're not doing
on
that,
your
I
listing,
wouldn't do that.
I'm not saying you would. What I'm saying is, you're an independent contractor. We hope and pray that you'll abide by the guidelines in our policies and procedures. We recommend that you will always have professional photos done. Are there people who don't? Yes. They say, in this market, I'm listing a $600,000 house. I can't possibly afford to spend $150 on photos and a video. Beyond me. But that's their choice. And they take pictures with their camera. Just as soon as you do that, you've set up an opportunity to put a ding in your reputation.
Yes.
Because as other realtors come in competition with you, they will use that against you, just like you should in your listing presentation.
So this,
Say, do you want this or do you want this?
so
And
this,
is what
this
we do.
company will do the video and everything, not just photos, right?
Correct.
And then what about, this is a dumb question, but let's say you are in a development and everyone, I noticed they all have the same signs. Where do you get the signs?
Sure, just,
What's the sign company? I know the sign companies have a list of, right, of all the, you know, they
the good
can,
sign companies have a list of all the subdivisions and know
Correct.
the requirements.
who is that sign company?
Well, there's one right up the street. and
Oh,
I don't
see,
remember
I don't
that
even
name.
know.
And then there's Giglio signs, which I use for most of my signs.
Giglio?
Giglio.
See,
They're
that's
located in
stuff
San Marco.
in San Marco, and they would, like, for instance, have Cimarron, Southampton, all that on their list? Okay, I didn't know that. Giglio, Giglio?
Yep,
And they're in San Marco.
yeah.
See, stuff like that, that's the part, I don't know. Did you guys know that, where to get signs?
I didn't. No.
See, it's those
yeah.
little things that, you know, I start, wake me up at night going, wait a minute, where you get
So
this?
send me a text or an email.
I will. That's why I kind of said to you, I need to sit down and I have just certain things I want to check off. That was one of them.
Okay.
All of it's, this was one of them, you know, that sort of thing. Just,
Yeah, but, you know, that's why we have a vendor list. That's why we
and
have
that vendor list is where again?
in app files.
Okay.
And that's why we have, that's why, I mean, you're fortunate to have a connection with Buzz. He
Mm-hmm.
will give you, I'm sure, a huge list of people that he likes to work with, or
Mm-hmm.
a minimal list of people he likes to work with. When it comes to inspectors, home inspectors, when it comes, I mean, all you have to do is Google Home Inspectors Jacksonville and you'll get 7,500.
Yeah.
That's probably over exaggeration, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, so it's a matter of, if you're looking for a company, we set our preferred lenders, three, sorry. We have three preferred lenders, our one preferred photo, our two currently preferred closing companies. But if you don't want to use those are just preferred. If you have a relationship with an attorney or a title company that you want to use, Great.
Who's your favorite closing company?
I love J. Riley Williams.
Jay,
J. Riley Williams.
okay.
Not Tyrone, you call it Tyrone.
Landmark is a really, really close second.
Landmark.
Don't tell
Oh,
David.
I love David.
I love David.
man.
Played golf with him a couple of weeks ago.
Who do
He's
you like,
very,
David?
very good.
David who? I think you came, is this for the?
David Heekin. Heekin.
Heekin?
What's the close title company?
J.R. Riley.
J. Riley
J.
Williams.
Williams.
Yeah, I've heard that.
That's a title company, huh?
He's an attorney
Attorney,
and title company.
right.
He has an office here at the beach. There's one in Avondale. Well, Riverside.
That's good to know.
I've just used him a lot of years, and I really like him. He, as a personality, does not have the personality that David has, by any stretch.
David's awesome, man.
He's fantastic.
Where's David located?
David is the owner of Landmark Title.
Oh, he's Landmark.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's the lead attorney at Landmark.
and which Landmark is that? Is it around here?
It's located behind the Bentley dealership.
Oh, Oh,
off of Butler on Financial Way.
behind the Bentley, yeah.
At the most recent meeting, it was that Landmark. Were you at the last meeting? Okay.
Our sales
David was
meetings are
here?
held at Landmark now.
David was here.
Next
Yeah, the
Tuesday I
last
will, I
meeting.
mean, second Tuesday,
Oh, you're talking about
June
the,
14th.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I missed that one. Were you there?
I noticed. Was I there?
Oh, he was? Oh, man, it would be awesome, man.
Thank you.
Oh, man.
Kind of the one that leads it. Anyway. That's just funny. Was there something else?
No, that's it, because we picked the closing company, right? Obviously.
Well,
Obviously,
seller,
if
basically.
we're listing,
not obviously. It's a great question. We'll talk more about that when we talk about closing costs, which is the next thing. But
if
in-
they have a preference, maybe they want one, but
who they?
our clients, whoever we're listing the home with, right? They can pick somebody. Maybe they,
Okay, so
The person who pays for it.
okay, I'm really getting
You're
confused.
not gonna talk about it.
can of worms open.
But
So
go
here's
ahead.
here's the unwritten rule. Is
Okay,
exactly what Anwar said. The person who pays for the owner's title insurance policy is usually the one who chooses where the closing will take place. Why? Because the owner's title insurance policy is one of the most expensive items for the seller in the closing. So that's why the unwritten rule is if you're paying for the owner's title insurance policy, you get to choose where it closes.
okay,
So your point of, well, if the seller has someone they really want to close with, they choose, right? I don't know. One of the strategies that buyers have been putting into place in this very active and competitive market is I will pay X number of dollars towards your closing costs, or I will pay for the owner's title insurance policy.
therefore they get to pick, or not
I
necessarily?
don't know.
Oh, okay,
When they say I'm willing to pay for it, do they also say I want to choose?
yeah,
So in the NEFAR purchase and sale agreement, it's not defined. You just check the box
right,
for owner's title insurance policy.
Right.
That box is not on the buyer side, but the buyer can say in other, not check the box under seller, and under their other expenses say buyer willing to pay owner's title insurance policy.
okay,
But if the buyer then wants to select it, the buyer would then have to say, and select the closing attorney or title company. In the FAR bar purchase and sale agreement, it's outlined that way. It says who's going to choose the closing attorney and who's going to pay for the owner's title insurance policy. So it's a difference between the two purchase and sale agreements. In the listing agreement, it just shows as seller expense, closing costs, deed stamps, owner's title insurance policy. So the listing agreement sets up the seller to have the expectation
correct,
to pay for the owner's title insurance policy. So what I can tell the seller at the onset of the listing is your closing costs are going to run approximately 9% of the purchase price.
9%.
One of those expenses is the owner's title insurance policy. As the person paying for the owner's title insurance policy, it would be customary for you to select the title company or attorney closing the transaction. Is there someone you would like to work with, or would you like me to select someone for us to close with? So again, where does this occur? This occurs during your seller consult.
Right,
Now, what I also need to be telling the seller in this market, in this day and age, is now, during the negotiations, there is the potential that the buyer may be willing to cover the cost of the owner's title insurance policy. As long as it falls within the guidelines of their lending, then there should be no problem. and they may request who to close with. Are you comfortable with that? Yes or no? And remember, right now, in most cases, a listing associate creates offer instructions that they put into MLS
Correct.
so that the buyer's associate has all the detail to fully complete the offer. And one of the pieces
Right.
is down at the bottom of page 1 that says, where is the binder being held?
Right.
Most times buyers like to put the binder money, or most times associates working with buyers prefer to have the binder money held with the attorney that's going to close the property, because it's one less step that has to be managed in order to get from contract to closing.
Right.
Long answer to a short question.
Yeah, but that was
But-
important. The buyer, so 9% is what we really should be telling them is gonna be their cost of closing costs generally. Unless
For a
the,
seller.
for the seller, yeah. Unless the buyer opts to pick up some of these maybe for a stronger offer. Yeah. 9%.
And there's not one type of lending, I don't know if that's proper English, precludes a buyer from contributing to the seller closing costs. But there are certain closing costs a buyer cannot pay based on the type of lending. For example, a VA buyer cannot pay any portion of a brokerage fee. So they can't pay the commission, they can't pay the transaction fee, none of that.
Buyers and sellers.
VA buyers.
Yeah, buyers.
Buyers.
VA sellers, it wouldn't impact them.
Okay.
A VA seller can pay a transaction fee. Because they're not getting paid.
Right, you're not getting one.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I was just gonna say, but a VA buyer commission, so you're saying that at some point, this is the buyer now, he wouldn't be paying the commission anyway, right?
Why not? We have a buyer agency agreement where the buyer says, if you're not getting your professional fee during this transaction, I will either pay you, or I will make up the
Oh,
difference
I got
between
you,
what
you're
you
saying.
get
Okay, gotcha.
and what they're willing to pay.
Okay, gotcha. So the VA buyer cannot pay, I know what you're saying now, it's commission. And what was the other one? They can't pay
Transaction fee,
transactions, so the $250.
correct. So we do waive the $250 for VA buyers.
Yeah,
Why you gotta charge you?
That's our transaction fee.
It's a must. You can't. I mean,
You can waive it for your buyers or your sellers, but we're gonna collect it from you. Huh?
commission. I mean, I should try to $2.
no,
Well,
it's automatically on the closing thing, but people don't really even question it.
No,
It's
no,
definitely
you
not
have to
to-
sign it. You have to sign it, I think. Yeah, when you make it, when you make an offer, who pays it? The buyer and the seller both.
Both.
So yeah, you're gonna have to sign it. I've seen it where.
So when you're making the offer and you're filling out the buyer closing costs, you put $250 under transaction fee, it's already listed on the
Yeah.
closing costs.
So you don't need to.
Makes sense. So it makes sense from the buyer side. I'm just saying, the seller side, you collect a big commission.
So it's nothing compared to what you've been
I
paying.
guess, bro.
The only thing that we went to an open house or something in Indiana a while ago, and we went to use their agent, and right away before we started showing anything, it wasn't anything about his commission, but it was about the brokerage fee. And we were like, oh, I didn't even see anything that I have to pay a brokerage. It was
Yes,
really a
it was
turn-off.
very-
It was just uncomfortable. So we didn't end up working with it because it was just uncomfortable. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Before even making an offer, I want you to sign this paperwork. I want you to go to them.
With a fee
Well,
attached to it?
I don't think it was even required until probably at the time of closing, but just the fact that we had to, the first time meeting them, and we didn't really even see a house yet, and he was talking about the brokerage fee and not even his own fee, so it's just like
I don't know what the rules
Yeah.
are in Indiana, so I can't address
never
it.
happened with anybody else.
Yeah.
Even
Or
somebody
maybe
else.
the rules of his brokerage. It could have been a disclosure issue. For example, when I first started, when I first started talking to a buyer or seller, I had to disclose the type of representation I would be using, transaction versus single agency, which was very difficult to do. And when we were kind of discussing single agency and transaction the other day, you know, I said, we're our own worst enemies. We were uncomfortable doing it, so we put it off until the very end, which was a violation of the law.
Yeah.
Oh,
So, I get it. We want to be able to work with our customers. We want to have an open, honest relationship. We want to be liked. We want them to be our friends. So we don't want to piss them off, right? We think talking about money is going to piss them off. But that means we're not looking at what we're doing as a business. Look, I'm running my fanny around town, showing you properties after properties after properties, spending my gas, spending my time. I don't get paid till you close. So if you leave me high and dry in the middle of all this, I'm out whatever value you put on that.
you know, you're really right about all of this. I had a client who literally did not know I was representing the buyer. He literally said, "How much do I owe you?" And I said, they honestly need to be educated from the very beginning.
And whose job is that?
Right. And I said, you have to understand the seller will be the one paying your commission. You don't owe me a thing. I'm doing, all these things for you, but the seller's the one who's paying the commission. He was totally shocked. He said, "Oh, I thought I owed you some money." I said, "No, you don't owe me out of pocket." In other words.
Unless you do a BPO,
Oh,
Broker
well,
price
that's
opinion?
true. If you want to charge for one.
A broker price opinion?
Yeah. I thought you guys, no? You want to charge?
You're talking about, can you please tell me what you mean by broker price opinion?
Bro, yeah. You want to charge for that? Oh, okay, I thought you
Tell
guys
me,
charged.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what it is.
From
You
the
cannot
textbooks that
appraise
we're
a
looking at.
property, but you could give your professional opinion and charge them for.
Oh, the CMA.
Yeah.
Okay. CMA and broker price opinion, in my head, are two very different things. A CMA is something that you do as a realtor to establish a value range for a seller. A broker price opinion is a request that comes from a lender
Serious.
or a third-party company asking to establish a value
Oh my gosh.
for compensation on the other side.
So what happens if the agent asks?
What happens, I'm sorry?
What happens if the agent asks what kind of law do they work?
It's not a law, it's just two different things
Because
the-
you charge.
in the real world.
If there's an agent from, I grew up 97 Park.
97 Park?
Park brokerage.
97
That's
Park
Smaller
brokerage.
brokerage in St. Augustine.
Well, there's like three different agents and stuff.
Right.
And one time they were like, "Okay, I can help you with this car, but I'm gonna charge you for it."
Okay, that's fine.
That's fine.
That's
Oh,
fine.
okay.
I don't know what terminology they're
Okay,
using.
what would happen was the off market market. I wanted to buy them. What do you think about it? Well, I'm not making money off, but I'm off of it. I'm gonna charge you for the
Okay. I would have said I'm going to charge you for a CMA. A broker price opinion customarily comes from a third-party relocation company, a lender or bank, someone who wants to establish a value of a property as related to their portfolio or for potential resale from
okay.
a,
I just want you then.
I'm not saying you did. I'm just saying this is how I know them over time. That broker price opinion is something that is requested by a third party and they agree to compensation to you for that broker price opinion. And they agree to pay you $100 or $125 or whatever. Naturally, just like any payment, it must go through the brokerage.
That's what I was gonna say, yeah.
Why? I was gonna talk about that.
Right.
So, say I say I charge you $150. I have to pay her a commission of.
It has to go through the brokerage. It has to go through the brokerage. And you bring up a good point, because I don't think we cover in our policies what percentage we would take, or if it would do it, it would be done at your split.
It's 100 pounds.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But you can't be paid directly.
Right, exactly. You have to pay them. Right.
I used to do broker price opinions and stopped after about the fourth one when they didn't pay.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Was it a bank or
Mm-hmm.
the bank didn't pay? Wow.
Yeah, at that point I went, no more, because it takes hours. There are forms that you have to fill out for a broker price opinion. It's as long, if not longer, than doing a CMA. Because there are required fields, there are required pieces that you have to give, you have to go and take a certain number of photos. It's a lot of work. They're used a lot for foreclosed properties from banks. And you're not always guaranteed the listing if they decide to go ahead and list it, which is even worse.
I see in my neighborhood, there's a realtor who consistently sends out letters saying, I'll do a CMA for you at no charge, and basically just to make the introduction. What is your house worth? Do you think that's a good marketing tool?
I think CMAs are a great marketing tool. I think it's how you present it. I think that our agents should be reaching out to their past customers every year and
Yeah.
providing the CMA almost automatically.
That's
For
what you need. I
areas
need to
that-
learn how to do this. Even more every time I talk about this.
For areas that they're trying to gain a foothold in, I think it's a great way. I think it's a better way to walk the neighborhood and maybe use door hangers to say, here's a coupon for a free CMA, as long as the community doesn't prohibit solicitation.
No, they really don't, but they kind of do in some cases, but not that. I've seen door
You
hangers.
could do it on your Facebook page. You can do it in Instagram. You could do it in a mail out. You could offer a coupon anywhere. I mean, I wouldn't go to Groupon, but anyway,
Well, no, Groupon wouldn't make any money on that.
you'd be paying them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well.
So you're bringing us to a great place. We establish the listing price. The seller establishes the listing price based on the range you've recommended, and then we want to identify different methods of payment. So, what types of loans, if not cash, is the seller willing to consider? The seller has no obligation to accept all types of financing.
Right.
So, does it fall into the guidelines? For example, if we look at the price point, does the price point match the type of financing? Well, cash is pretty much okay for just about any price point. Conventional, pretty much okay for just about any price point. VA, remember, VA has loan limits, and it's based on the county.
670. Well, how much is the loan? Is that
6. I don't remember, I'd have to look it up
It was
again.
674.
674.
it's not that great. Not bad.
No.
I think
That's
so.
gone
My
way
visual
up.
mind is saying, yeah.
Well, and it can go up from there. Even in our county, depending on the level of the individual who's making the application for the loan, it can go up as high as $1 million.
So how do we get an update? How do we get an update on the limit?
So their limits are published. You can just search them online. And then you want to, of course, talk to a lender that is comfortable doing VA. Karen's great with VA. So it's just making sure that you have the connection with the individual, really, and the right person, right lender. But you also have to really know the market. Again, this is knowing your market. If you're looking at a subdivision and 40% are VA and 40% are FHA and 20% are conventional, and your seller says, look, I'm not really interested in working with VA buyers, you need to understand why. First of all, some sellers have forgotten or worked with VA in the past when there were certain things that a VA buyer couldn't pay that than
Went on to
the seller had to pay. So in the olden days, a traditional conventional was here for payment, and an FHA buyer was here impacting the seller. In other words, a seller had to pay a little more for an FHA buyer, and VA buyer turned out to be. Now, pretty much all the same. Rates, pretty much all the same. Lending requirements, pretty much all the same. Even FHA and conventional have taken from VA, and now oftentimes in the appraisal from a conventional or FHA, there are requirements that must be completed, repairs, in order for the house to meet the appraised value. So it's mes a mes, it's the same anymore for all different types of lending. But if your seller is saying, I would prefer not to work with a particular type of loan or buyer with a particular type of loan, you need to make sure you know what the breakout in that market has been in the most recent sales. Because you need to confirm with them that they're okay eliminating a certain percentage of the market. It also demonstrates your knowledge of the market. Additionally, remember if your if your seller is offering the house out and you get an FHA buyer and the FHA buyer moves forward, or VA, and for some reason the house doesn't appraise and the seller elects not to negotiate with the buyer, or the buyer elects not to pay the appraisal gap, that appraisal is going to stick with the property for at least 90 days. So any other FHA or VA buyer that comes in, so if it was FHA, any other FHA buyer that comes in, if it was VA, any other VA buyer that comes in, is going to have the same appraisal. So it's not going to appraise for either of them. And I will tell you that even if you put into MLS, when you're filling out the form, you have to identify what types of lending or what types of payment the seller's willing to consider. Even if you don't put FHA in there, I would almost guarantee that you may get an FHA offer, because a lot of realtors don't read that section.
What is USDA? I'm not familiar with that one.
USDA is like a conventional, but it's a rural oriented product.
Okay.
It's not available in Duval County, but it is available in Clay,
Okay.
Putnam, Nassau, St. John's, sections of St. John's,
Okay.
and it can be done at 100% financing.
Is there a way to organize my search on the MLS for FHA? That way, because you're saying even though some people don't check out FHA, but it's stuck in the FHA offer, you know, but focus on properties that you can't accept FHA, go around the MLS, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But there is.
Yeah.
That's another question I'm going to for the USDA, because I don't want to go looking at properties that won't take USDA. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I know that some part of road golf can take it, but not the other park sides.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
20 Mile won't take USDA.
But just because they accept it doesn't mean that the lenders will accept it. So they could mark USDA, right? They don't have they're not lenders.
The lenders.
When a realtor says, we'll accept USDA if you can get that to work. Or,
Sure, but in most cases, as a listing associate, you should know whether the property will qualify or not for USDA.
yeah.
Because it's based on the property, not.
You would need to know around the profession. Not to aim with the property that's USDA loans.
Well, and this is where I think a lot of people get into this business and don't realize there's a lot of stuff you have to think about.
Yes.
But okay, so there is a way on the MLS we can organize it. Also, to find right there.
Properties that are available for USDA, yes.
Cool, because I think we have a client that wants to use that, so I'm trying to figure out. It's hard.
Or-
It's hard. I gotta figure out how to.
Go to the USDA website.
Yeah, it's their website. So how they organize it by zip code? How they organize them?
In MLS?
No,
The
USDA
USDA.
loan.
Oh, you would go by area.
Area.
in MLS, you would use the search field to add a search field, and you would put in financing, or keep it simple, like FIN, and look for the category that has these types of financing or payment available, add that to your search, and then select only FHA.
I did add that for owner financing.
Okay.
I played around with the
Same
logo.
thing.
So when you're educating the sellers, you're saying you're telling me now that there's really no difference between any of these except for the qualifiers you're getting with USDA. What is the disadvantage of FHA, that they put a less percentage down, or what that shouldn't
The
do it?
disadvantage to who?
They're looking at offers, and this person's coming in with an FHA loan as opposed to conventional loans. How do we educate them as to this is primarily the same, or what's the disadvantage of FHA
There's no disadvantage to
to
a
the
seller.
seller? Okay, so really, we should educate that, check off the FHA box, right?
If it falls within the acceptable guidelines, for example, if the property is listed at 800,000, that's not going to be available for a buyer to use
Oh, yeah.
FHA financing
Right.
because of the loan limits. But what your job is to do is to really lay out the terms and conditions, and if you're in a multiple offer situation, make sure that they can compare all the different features.
Right.
So there's a multiple offer matrix in app files that you can use. It's a spreadsheet that you can use to fill in the pertinent information. If you want to use it for a single offer, I don't think that's a bad idea either, because it brings all of the terms and conditions to the forefront and allows the seller to review all of the terms and conditions. If they're concerned about a piece or one of the terms or conditions, for example, FHA financing, then it's our job to say, great, I understand that you have a concern, can you tell me why? And if they say, well, you know, with FHA financing, I have to pay some of the closing costs that the buyer can't pay. All right, I understand that that may have been the case the last time you used or sold a house, but in our current market, an FHA buyer can pay the exact same fees that a USDA or a conventional buyer can pay.
Okay.
So if that was the concern, I think we can eliminate that. You shouldn't have any additional expenses unless the buyer is asking you to cover some of their closing costs. So what else would be a concern about going with a buyer that has FHA financing? Well, they aren't going to have to put as much down, so their interest in the property is less.
Right.
I don't know that their interest in the property is less, and we still have a very high interest level, but their investment is less.
Right.
And if that's a concern to you, then that's a valid concern. Absolutely. Their financial investment is less. It doesn't mean they don't have less of an interest in the property.
Right.
So are you saying, Mr. Seller, we have an FHA offer, would you be willing to counter them in other terms and conditions that would make you feel there's strength? Well, no, I just want to know that they have more money into it. Okay. Would you consider increasing the binder amount? Well, if they have more money for the binder, why aren't they putting it down? I don't know. That could be a strategy, but we won't know until we ask. Would you be willing to try and have a shorter inspection period so that at least we can move forward with an offer that we have, but keep ourselves off the market on a shorter period of time? So it's talking the seller through and making sure they're aware, because sellers don't do this on a regular basis.
No, they don't. They don't really know the differences. They, FHA had kind of a bad rep.
Yeah, because if the property condition is not good, if the property condition is not good, you can't get out the check.
They have higher, I think I asked you this before.
Yes, they do.
Don't they still have higher requirements than for the inspection, for the loan appraisal?
Not any higher than conventional anymore.
Geez, my daughter bought a house once, and she basically, FHA made the sellers paint the whole house.
Because it's peels.
Yes. because
That's
of-
VA, that's not FHA.
No, she was FHA. And honestly, I said, gee, this is a great deal. But I don't think a conventional loan would have done that.
Conventional loan won't look at things like chipping paint.
No, but
Will
they had
VA
to pay.
probably? FHA may.
Yes, she had to have the whole place painted
When was that?
a year ago.
A year ago.
But this is in California, but still FHA is,
FHA is FHA.
yeah.
But it also depends on the appraiser inspector that you get too.
Yeah. I said,
Most
this is the
appraisers-
greatest deal.
most appraisers or inspectors with FHA or VA that come out, if it's something like chip paint or peeling paint, unless the entire house has chip paint or peeling paint, they're not gonna usually require the entire house to be painted. They'll require that the area that has chip paint be
Correct.
sanded.
Correct,
Clean
and
and paint.
basically, she had 3 sides of the house, and so I said, just pay them a little more and get the rest of the house done too.
Okay, so that's a fuller story.
Yeah, they did, but it was, you know, it was a big deal,
Yes, it is a big deal.
yeah.
In your example, with the seller paying a higher bundle instead of the higher bundle.
Did the buyer paying a higher binder?
Well, I'm sorry.
Okay,
The buyer, the seller questioned the buyer to pay a higher bundle instead, and the seller asked the buyer to verify they have more funds to see if they're stronger.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That's come up a lot with the appraisal gap. And even in the appraisal addendum, it says that the buyer has to show where the monies are gonna come from.
Okay, but if the buyer is not paying for the gap,
Okay,
and still, you can, I just wanna know if you're able to ask.
you can ask for anything.
Okay, for bank statement, see how much money you got.
Yeah, you can, absolutely. Most of the time, the statement comes in the form of a pre-approval or a pre-qualification letter. That's what you really want, is something from the lender that says these people are qualified.
Right, and in that case, like you were saying, FHA convention, nowadays it's the same thing. So you know what I mean? Like you were saying, you ask the seller, what is your concern? That's a good way to represent it.
Yeah.
I mean, a seller can ask a buyer to do pretty much anything as long as it's legal. And a buyer can say no. Just like a seller can sell to whomever they want to sell to. A seller has no obligation to sell to everyone. They can make their own decisions. You can't, but they can.
Yeah,
So you have to be very careful of that. So, once we talk a little bit about what we're going to ask for the property and what types of financing we might consider, obviously there's also the opportunity for the seller to consider additional financing or financing the property. Then we want to talk about the closing costs. So a seller is going to have closing costs just like a buyer would have closing costs. These are the normal, customary seller closing costs. They're exactly the same as they are in the purchase and sale agreement,
Okay,
except
I
in the
was gonna
purchase
ask
and
you
sale
that.
agreement, they're lined out one on top of each other in columns. Here they're just in a paragraph, but it's the same.
yeah, I was gonna ask you that.
So, and what we kind of talked about is the seller is looking at about 9% of the purchase price for closing costs.
What is the buyers?
3 to 4.
Or less, like if it's cash and stuff like that, yeah, right?
Cash can be less, absolutely. The seller may be willing to contribute towards the buyer closing costs, check market trends. It's a good statement there. There is so much information you can find from MLS. If it has not been customary for a seller to contribute towards the buyer's closing costs, then it may not be reasonable to ask the seller to do that. If it has been consistent or has been reasonable, or you find that quite a few of the closed properties, the seller has made a concession and that concession was related to closing costs, then I would probably prepare your seller to pay some closing costs. The market is shifting again. So watch for what market trends are. I did neglect to mention that not only does an appraisal stick with a property in FHA and VA for 90 days, but both VA and FHA require that a property must have title that has been solid. In other words, an individual must have held title for at least 6 months, maybe down to 4. 4 months, we'll say 4 to 6 months, in order for FHA or VA to finance on that property. So what you may see in MLS under private remarks is not available for investors until a specific date.
Okay, I've seen that.
I never knew why,
So they give everyone else.
But that's only for an FHA or VA buyer.
Yeah,
If the buyer's using conventional or cash, it doesn't apply.
I didn't understand 90 days. I didn't understand the 90 days. What do you mean by that?
The appraisal?
The appraiser stays with the property for 90 days.
So if you come to me and make an offer and you're using FHA financing and I'm listed at 300,000 and you make me an offer at 300,000, but the property appraises with an FHA appraisal at $280,000 and we can't come to an agreement, in other words, I'm not willing to drop down to 280 or you're not willing to come up with a little money and I'm willing to come down and we decide to walk away. Now Margot comes and makes me an offer and she's FHA financing, that appraisal is given to her.
Okay, that makes sense.
The lender will use the same appraisal. Or FHA guidelines require the use of the appraisal.
Okay. So now the 6 months.
Now, no,
90
the
days.
appraisal,
4 months.
the title. Title must cure for FHA or VA to lend on. Two different things, title versus appraisal. So if you own a house and you are an investor and you bought that house this month, what do we, June, and it took you 2 months to renovate that property. Now it's August and you want to put the property back on the market. And it happens to be in an area where there are a lot of FHA or VA buyers. Neither FHA or VA will allow a buyer to purchase that property until you have had title for at least an additional 2 to 4 months.
She said 2 to 4.
well, actually 4 to 6 total.
Right, so it would be
So-
2 to 4 months more.
Oh, so okay. So I have to have the 6 months total.
Yeah,
4 to 6.
you
We'll
can't
have to check
remember if
with
it's
the
4
lender.
or 6.
But your title has to cure before a VA or FHA lender will allow a buyer to buy that property. That's all based on the past bubble, when VA and FHA were lending on properties that had had extreme increases in price, and then the bubble hit, and those properties were hit the worst. They lost the greatest amount of value, and now FHA and VA buyers were going underwater, losing their houses. So both FHA and VA said the title has to cure before we're willing to lend on the title, on the property.
You got that note? For 6 months.
So it just depends if there were a lot of FHA or VA buyers in a market or in an area where you're lending, or where you're selling, excuse me.
So maybe if you hit the mark, yes, I remember something.
Hippie girl. Say what? I'm sorry?
Now, if you hit the market, you just can't consider after survey only cash or conventional.
Right.
Gotcha.
Unfortunately, it's usually in areas where the majority of buyers have been using FHA or VA. Just based on price point. And ability to flip. You good, Margo?
Yeah,
Okay.
I am good on that, yeah.
All right, so watch the market, watch the conditions, see what's realistic and reasonable, and see what's normal and customary, and prepare your seller. The seller is also responsible for any charges that a buyer's lender will not allow a buyer to pay. Again, it's very limited these days. Most cases, a buyer can pay all closing costs. The seller is responsible for all mortgage, condominium, and homeowners associations and assessment payments. Just because they put the property on the market doesn't mean that they get to stop making their payments. So we have to remind them, please keep making your payments. Everything
For
is
the
in,
HOA,
excuse me,
for the HOA,
everything,
Yeah.
yeah, talk to you.
everything.
Funny you would think otherwise
I don't know,
before
man.
closing.
It's in here for a reason. It's funny, you list a house and people go, oh, well, I can stop making my payment now and because, you know, we're gonna close and they'll take a new payment and they're gonna pay off my loan. It's like, no.
That's so funny.
Keep paying.
That's
That's how you don't lose your house.
But that's for the mortgage, you close before the grace period, and then you can skip on that mortgage.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Say your grace period is on the 15th, and then you close on the 10th, and you don't pay that mortgage.
I'm not understanding. What are we talking about?
If you're selling a home and your mortgage payment is due on the 15th, that's the grace period. Normally you pay it on the 1st or something, but you have a
I'm
grace
sorry, I
period.
understand.
So you don't have to pay that payment. Otherwise it would just be sent to you at closing from the day it's not stated, right?
I would still recommend making your payment.
Even after closing.
Not after closing.
Not after, right.
But for example, if I'm gonna close on the 5th of the month, my payment was due on the 1st, but I have a grace period to the 15th, I'm still gonna make my payment on the 1st of the month.
Yeah.
I had
And then have them send me back anything over, as well as any monies left in my escrow account.
every time I refund, I had always that strategy. Let's skip that one. Get too much.
I'm still gonna recommend, as your listing associate, that you make your payment. Prorations. Any prorations or any items that are prorated will be prorated as of the day of closing. The day of closing belongs to the buyer. So the day before closing belongs to the seller, the day of closing belongs to the buyer. Anything is prorated is going to follow those guidelines. This includes any rental payments, any security deposits, any taxes, any other fees, HOA, CDD, anything that's paid on a monthly basis is prorated based on the day of closing. Actually, the day before closing. So because the day of closing belongs to the buyer,
Right.
that's what they're going to use in their calculations.
I understood that, but some buyers decide to ask you, so show me the map. How much is going to be prorated? I'm comfortable answering that. I know that it's best to say, well, at closing, it'll be all figured out for you. You know what I mean? But
In your packet from the purchase and sale agreement, there is a sheet that shows closing costs, customary closing costs. It shows you what they are, and it shows you how to calculate them.
oh,
So for example, taxes. Everybody remember taxes? We don't like to remember taxes, but they exist. Anyway, so this is 2022, this is January, this is December, 2023, January. When do tax liens get placed on the property?
The 1st of January.
January 1st. So January 1st, everybody gets a tax lien.
Right.
Are taxes paid in advance or in arrears?
in the room.
Arrears. Tax lien comes, that's why the bill comes in November. And if you pay it in November, what happens?
You do this.
How much?
4%, 9%.
Excuse me?
I was telling him that job, if you remember this.
So in December would be
3.
Man.
on fire.
Well, I remember because my seller financing didn't pay it in November. I'm like, that's all I knew.
Okay, and then, it'll become due, in March. Okay. So, those are pretty.
They ought to be, right?
So taxes are calculated based on what? What amount dictates how the taxes are calculated?
Oh, your assessed price,
Okay, so but where does that price come from?
County.
County?
Not the
Appraisal.
appraisal.
Wanna throw one out there?
Tax guy, assessor.
Yeah, this is what I'm thinking, the tax assessor.
That's value.
Okay, but where did, so for the tax assessor to establish a value,
Oh.
what do they have to have? The most recent
Most is the tax.
sales price.
Oh, I see what you're going for, okay.
Because remember, anytime you buy a house, your taxes get reassessed based
Oh, I
on the
see what you're
current
saying.
sales
Okay.
price.
So it means in this market now, the property tax is going up because the value of the home has been selling.
So what's an advantage that our county offers that can help a buyer?
I have no idea.
Portability. Okay. So nobody's heard of portability?
I'm not sure what you mean either.
Okay, so our county says that,
Oh, the homestead?
no,
Although homestead helps. I always tell my people to get a homestead, but go ahead, portability.
so portability allows you to take your current tax base and move it to your new home
Oh, I got what you're trying to say.
and have your property taxes assessed based on your previous
Oh,
amount
How
not good.
long?
for primary residences only.
Not good for me.
What?
Haha, no.
Okay.
So there's a calculation that they do. So if I've lived in my house for 20 years and I paid $200,000 for it and I'm selling it for $800,000 and I'm moving to a house that's either more or less than that, I can take my current assessed value, which can't go up more than 3% per year, right? So over 20 years, did it go up 3% per year? I don't know. But whatever the current assessed value is, the current increased assessed value from the time that I purchased it, I can take that value and move it to my new home based on the amount of time that I lived in my current home. And
Oh.
they will take the tax assessment base and reduce it. So now I'm starting at a less than sales price amount.
Sales price, what if you refinance?
I think
What
that
would you,
doesn't
that
matter.
doesn't matter, the value?
Doesn't matter, the value is established at this time of sale.
Okay.
Because to calculate taxes, it's your sales price times 0.92. Don't ask me what 0.92 is, it's an adjusted value. This gives you your adjusted base. From here, you take out any exemptions. Your exemptions could be military, spousal, homestead, any of those exemptions. We'll just use homestead. So on average, homestead is about 35,000. So your initial 25 plus an additional 25 averages out to be about 35,000. So this gives you your taxable base. You take your taxable base times your county millage rate. Established by the county, runs about 1.175 on average. And this gives you your annual tax base. So that calculation is on that page. So whenever someone asks you, just pull out the page and use that as a reference.
Okay. That's good to know. I had to age. I was just thinking, it's a camera, big to see the bull.
Yes.
It's big to see the Alright, that's good to know.
I think it sees all of it.
Portability, that's what it's
It has
called.
been.
Portability.
I tried adding the captions last night, and I could do it in settings, but it wouldn't stay.
I've always had problems on the computer or the phone, but if you upload to a TV and I do both,
We do
text
it.
captions and press captions, the wrong.
Playing in YouTube, I can press the settings button and add captions, but I can't save it, so it will always have the captions. But when I pull up the video in YouTube, there's a little wheel in the upper right-hand corner of the video. If I click on it, it gives me the option to add captions. And I thought, oh yay, I figured it out. And then I went back to it and it wasn't there.
That's fine.
Like, damn.
On the computer, the laptop is just very hard to read the captions. The way you follow it on TV.
Yeah, I started reading it and I went, I don't think I said that. But anyway, so the calculations are on that page. Don't ever shy away from talking to your customer about whatever their question is. If you want to take a breather, say, great, let me get back to that. I'll calculate what your closing costs would be
That's a good
and
idea.
give you a sheet, and then run to me. And we'll calculate it together. It's not a problem.
Okay, I think that's what I'm gonna do.
The sheet also tells you what the average costs are, like for a survey or for an appraisal, or what the cost would be for mortgage insurance premium. If you have trouble with it, just let us know, we'll figure it out from there.
Is that something we talk about at the buyer consult? I can't remember if we,
Both buyer and seller consult.
yeah, buyer consult.
There's also a application in MLS that calculates for you.
Oh, nice.
Well, yes and no.
No, don't follow that.
No, it's a great tool. The problem I have with agents using it, remember I'm somewhat old-fashioned, is you use that and then you give it to your customer, buyer or seller, and then you can't explain it because you had something generated for you. And they say to you, well, how do I get my taxes? Well, it shows you right there. Well, but wait, how did that come together? Well, they calculated at the tax office. Well, but I don't understand where the number comes from. And then you keep avoiding the question.
They start doing that dance move.
Bob and weave. Bob and weave. Bob and
That's
weave.
right.
That's right.
That's
Anyway,
right.
it's important to be able to answer your customers' questions. And if you can't, it's also good to be honest and say, I need 10 minutes. Or let me put that on the list, my parking lot list of things I need to bring back to you. And how about I come back tomorrow at 3?
I like that response.
Don't feel pressured.
So this is called the portability, is that what you said?
No, this is just calculating taxes.
But you said you can take the portability of the house? This is the part I don't see the connection here.
We didn't even talk about
Oh,
calculating portability.
okay.
All we talked about was the fact that portability exists. This is how to calculate taxes.
Okay. So I was-
Portability exists, which allows you to decrease your tax base on a new primary property.
Going through the tax office, the county.
Right.
You just tell them I used to live this property, I sold it now. It's my new property. How you
That's a nice idea to say, oh, I used to live in this property.
Okay, here's the thing, man. I haven't had any of my properties on homestead.
Most of them are?
None of them.
Of course.
None of them.
Okay.
So,
So you can't use portability.
so I can't use it? Dang it.
Has to be your primary residence.
Are you talking just count, it has to be in the same county, or can it be from like California to Florida?
Has to be within the state of Florida. It's
Yeah,
only
that's what I
it's only
thought.
available
Okay.
for the state of Florida.
Okay,
Only available for the state of Florida and only available for primary residents.
right, okay. That's what I was wondering. Okay, gotcha.
How long does that portability last? Is it a limited time? That would transfer over from the previous property?
Nope, it resets your tax base.
Hmm.
So instead, if I sold my house for 800, but I bought it for 200, obviously my tax base is a lot less, right? Because my 200 started my tax base and I've lived there X number of years. What the county does is say, okay, you live there X number of years, we're gonna give you a percentage break,
Right,
and that turns into a dollar value. and we're gonna apply that dollar value to the new home that you bought. You bought a new home that was 600,000, despite the fact that you sold for 8, you still bought a house at 600,000, which was more than you had as tax liability. So now from that 600,000, rather than starting you at 600,000 for your taxes, we're gonna decrease it by $100,000. So your tax base now starts at 500 versus 600.
Gotcha. I wasn't aware.
Your tax liability starts at a lower
I did not know
amount.
that. Okay, gotcha.
It makes a big difference.
Well, it does make a difference, but I just wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, my sister and brother-in-law did it. It's a
Does,
smart
now,
thing to do.
now, do most people,
Of course, I told them about it.
exactly, so most people aren't aware of this, right?
Most people aren't.
Yeah, so they don't even try and.
They
the
don't know that it
assessor-
exists.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
And it's not like our county's gonna go out and advertise that you can reduce your tax base
Gotcha.
on your primary residence.
Portability, okay, I wasn't aware of that. Huh,
All right, so at the onset of your listing, you wanna know what the intention of the seller is. So we're up to line 82, talking about possession.
We're gonna go out to our listing.
We'll finish the listing agreement. The rest of it is resources for you. No, the questions are all appropriate. Absolutely. So, the way that the listing agreement's lined out, it's also lined out to make sure that you have important discussions with your seller, things that you may forget about. And one of the things that we sometimes forget about is what's the intention of when they want to leave. So if it's a house they're selling that's an investment property, does the person who's currently living there have a lease? When does the lease end? If it's their home, when are they planning on getting out of it? If it's a second home, do they want to use it for the summer? So you have to ask all the right questions, or all the questions that are appropriate to making sure that you get good information so you know how to market the property. It can also give you an opportunity to say, hey, maybe now's not the right time to list your home. Maybe we need to list it in 2 months when it's more convenient for you. Maybe we need to list it in 2 months when the tenant's going to be out. We have one agent who's listing a condo right now, and the tenant has a lease that runs through the end of the year. But the seller's ready to market the property. Could be a good thing. Buyer comes in, has an automatic tenant. But when you look at the types of financing, remember, that means they're not going to be able to live in it for at least 6 months as their primary residence. Do they have to get a different type of a loan? Right? Or is this really only going to be available for cash buyers? I don't know. In California, in San Francisco, I was shocked. A friend of mine had a house in San Francisco on the beach side of the city. Are you guys familiar with San Francisco a little bit? It's like a kind of like a little island.
Right.
7 by 7 miles wide. And, yeah, it's very small actually.
It's very small. And there's the beach side, and then there's the ocean side. Or not ocean side, the river. Where underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Anyway, they were on the beach
river.
side. And yeah, I don't even think it's, what's it called?
It's ocean. That's all underneath
It's all
the
ocean,
gold.
isn't it?
Yeah, it's all
But
ocean.
the inlet. Okay, so the
Oh,
inlet
inlet.
side.
Yeah. Okay, say that.
The
Yeah.
inlet side. And she had a house, old house. She lived on the first floor and rented out the downstairs. Well, then she and her spouse moved to another house, so they rented out both units. And first of all, there's rent control in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And so since both units were rented, she decided she wanted to sell the building. Single family residents are valued at 30 to 40% more than investment properties because of rent control, right? So if I'm buying an investment property, I'm buying a duplex, triplex, whatever, that house, even though it could potentially be a single family house, is priced less by 30 to 40% than a single family house.
Wow.
So she wanted to sell the house. She was fine selling it as an investment property, but the buyer wanted to buy it as a single family house.
Oh,
She ended up having to buy out the leases to the tune of almost $100,000. It's crazy.
That's weird because it's all about the zoning. It's not about what you're doing to the property.
It's how the property's used, yeah.
Why?
They're both, but both zonings are residential.
Yeah.
It was crazy because I also learned that the lease, while it goes with the property, if I lease something in San Francisco proper, a city, and I lease it for $1,400 a month, and the market value is $2,500 a month, if I sublease that, it's okay. If I've now moved out and turned the property over to somebody else, as long as they're maintaining the lease, can increase the value. It was crazy. I just sat there in awe listening to what she was saying. She ended up getting good money for her property. It was obviously worth the extra money she had to pay,
yeah.
but because she'd owned it for a long time. But
poor San
still,
Francisco, I'm telling you. And all those rent control places, the owners were doing everything they could to get these people out. I mean,
you can't.
unbelievable stuff. You know, like, you know,
In when I lived in New York City, my friend had a 2-bedroom. I had a 1-bedroom and a den. She had a 2-bedroom, and she was paying $1,400 a month under rent control for that 2-bedroom, 2-bath. And I said, please just put me on the lease. Please put me on the lease. I promise I'll pay the rental fee until the day I die. But I couldn't.
New York's another one. Oh God.
Once in New York, when you put somebody else on the lease, they can revalue the lease.
Oh, they can revalue?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So we don't have that kind of restriction here in Florida, right?
Not in Jacksonville. There is rent control down south.
Wow. But I mean by the restriction with the property use, we don't have the restriction on the property use.
Other than residential versus commercial,
Like no, I mean like a single family compared to a duplex.
they're both residential.
Well, we can afford them. Their value less because.
Oh, they're not valued any differently. Unless the market says there's a different value.
Okay.
So in Avondale and Riverside, depending on cash flow, could determine the value of the property. That's why I think you're overpriced.
Well, I am at 10% cap rate with the current listing. I mean, I'm more than 10% cap rate. That's a good deal, I'm telling you. It's a good deal.
Furnished.
It's,
It's all
There you
furnished.
go.
and yeah, it's making
Selling
$20,000
furnished.
a month.
That's great.
You wouldn't buy it at that price?
Not at that price.
How much would you buy it? It's Kurt says.
I think your 1.5 was really a good deal.
What do you have it listed at?
It's an Avondale across that park was a hot park.
Midland Park by the shops of Avondale, and we have it listed at how much?
$8.99.
1.8. And the reason why we're listing it that way is because it generates $20,000 a month. So we feel like it's a good deal for investors to buy 10% cap rate because right now we're getting 5% cap rate in this market.
Ooh.
So that's my opinion. I'm not looking at how much it's getting appraised at, but I'm looking.
And it's like you're selling a
Really?
business. It's ready to go. You just buy it. You already have a lot of good paying customers ready to book. You take the business.
I don't disagree, except I'm not buying your business. You've established a business with a reputation. When I take that over,
Yeah.
I don't get your reputation.
Right, you don't get the.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to have the same bookings that you have based on your reputation.
Well,
The other part of it is, do I want short-term versus long-term? You've created a short-term cash flow. What if I don't want short-term? What if I want long-term?
God.
I guess
What's
It's
your
buyer versus
business?
seller.
What do you do?
We do we own Airbnbs, Verbos, and so it's just furnished rentals. And in that market, there's a lot of monthly stays and things like that. So it's
Right.
just between long-term renter. I mean, we have some that are 4 months staying, you know, or they extend their stay.
which is fabulous.
It's a variety of things, but just furnished rentals.
At 1.5, I keep the property, man. I keep the
Which is
property.
great. Yeah, and that's fantastic. Because it works for you guys.
Right.
Unless I had someone managing short term, I wouldn't do short term. I'm more comfortable long term.
We gotta put that in consideration, the expenses on property management.
Yeah.
It's just different philosophies, which is why it's so cool. I would love to see you get 1.8 on those two. I think 1.5 is good.
Well, you might. You just never know.
We had offer 1.5 twice.
Oh, twice.
Sometimes that dictates what the market is doing. Not saying it has to.
I guess I should go ahead and just drop the price, get closer to 1%, because I mean 1% is something I would take.
I don't know. What's the motivation to sell?
I count to 1.65. Oh, I'm trying to upscale. You know, we're trying to get a 20 unit.
To cash out what we can and then reinvest.
Because
In
the
a larger-
profit's gonna be
Yeah.
about 700,000 if I sell it at 1.6.
Yeah.
I'm sure about 100,000, so that's
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason to set the price, but now is now the right time. It's the same discussion you have to have with all of your sellers.
I think you told her I wasn't here, but investors are buying in a wintertime and they're on vacation in the summertime.
I think I learned about that. I was
Not
watching
here?
a
Oh,
YouTube
wasn't
seminar
here?
or something, I think.
What was it?
It was saying that investors typically, the market for investors are not during the summer, not like the residential, because they might be, you know, somewhere on their yacht in an island far away, you know, and they're here maybe more during the holidays or something to buy.
I don't think that's a false assumption. I think the rationale is probably not accurate. They're not going to go out and buy during high season when there's a lot of activity and a lot of people are on vacation paying increased rates, because of course that can offset the actual financials. When you have a period that's a little higher on short term versus
Well, that makes
another
total
period that's
sense.
a little lower.
Yeah, it's a
So
strategy.
I think it's great that they're out on their yachts. I wouldn't mind being out on a yacht. But I think it's more related to they're not going to go in making offers on properties when cash flow on the properties are very high or the occupancy is very high. They're, as an investor, going to want to go in and make an offer on a property when they're able to get a better deal. You didn't pay, let's see, they started at $575 each, and they were down to almost $500 each, and I don't think, if I remember correctly, you guys paid $450 or $475.
No, that's my offer. And it's for man, so we accepted that. No man. But the reason why I accepted $1 million is because I was able to get traditional loan in one section with self-financing.
Yeah, no, I don't think it was a bad purchase at all. And you turned it into a dynamic business, which is fantastic. It's just, what does the next buyer want?
Yeah.
I mean,
You got a
owner,
buyer? You got a buyer?
How long has it been on the market?
30 days.
How many days?
30 days.
Oh, that's not too bad. Oh.
I think I'm at 1.8, so I'm about to drop maybe 50,000 each.
Yeah.
Just move on. I'm gonna listen to him. Maybe 1.5.
I'm,
I
looking-
know what he's
I'm
saying.
gonna
No,
see
one-
what offers out
if
there.
it were me, I would have taken 1.5. The reason why, I know I have the cash. Cash today is worth a little more than cash tomorrow probably.
Yeah, I
So
agree
can
with
I do something with the money while I may not get exactly what I want in order to move to the next? Can I at least get the cash to do something with to potentially make up that differential or use it as leverage with a hard money lender, with some other opportunity. So is the cash in my hand more valuable to me today than it is 2 months from now? Okay.
Yeah, with
Each person has to make the decision themselves. And it may not be the right time for you guys. I mean, you guys may figure that now with the business running at cash flow like that, why bother? So we put off 6 months to do the increase. It might not be a bad idea with the shifts in the market. Don't tell Buzz I told you that.
We're recording.
It's
Yeah.
hard, it's hard.
All right, sorry, back to possession. So the seller needs to let you know what their intentions are, and obviously you'll have some idea when you look at the property, how they're moving forward. But are they going to go ahead and occupy the property? Do they want time after the closing? Are they willing to let the buyer in before closing? If they are currently rented, please make sure, or if there's any rental agreements or are any rental agreements, please make sure you get copies of those. You're not required to go ahead and put them in MLS, but you do want to have them because the requirement is within 5 days of going under contract, you provide a copy of all rent rolls and leases to the buyer. The buyer has to have those during the inspection period or the evaluation period to determine if they're comfortable and want to move forward. That could make a difference to them. Excuse me. The seller shall sweep the property clean, line 101, and that's again subjective. What does sweep mean? It's different to everybody. The point is prepare your buyers and prepare your sellers. They should intend on leaving the property in good condition. Also with tenant occupied properties, please note that the tenant must agree to anything that occurs on the property. Remember, they have the rights to the property during the lease period. So if the property is tenant occupied, you cannot take any photos or videos of the rented portion of the property without the tenant's permission, and it needs to be written permission. So if they don't give you permission to take photos of the interior, you can't take photos. You can only take photos from the entrance, or from the street actually, of the property.
And if it's written into the lease, do you need to have any further permission? If the permission says, we allow entrance for this pictures, marketing.
Yeah, it would just depend on what the notice is in your lease.
I'm talking about the tenant occupied properties.
Yeah.
So we can take a picture of their belongings.
Oh, so if you are taking pictures and it's their belongings, it's okay if they have.
As long
given
as they've
permission?
given you written permission.
Because
So they gotta
it's
get
assumed it
written
doesn't come with the
permission from
house.
both. So you gotta get written permission from both the tenant and the sellers.
No, the seller, in order to allow the realtor to go in and take pictures, the realtor must get permission from the tenant in order to go in and take pictures or video. They must also get permission for any open houses.
So me as a realtor have to get
Written
permission
consent?
directly from the tenant.
Correct,
Directly from the tenant.
correct.
Is this contract or is there a different form that we have?
There's a form
Okay.
that you provide to the tenant. It can either go through the landlord or seller, or it can go directly from you. But they must acknowledge that you're going to come in and take pictures or video. They must allow you to. Otherwise, you may only take pictures or video from the street. You can take pictures or videos of common areas, but not individual units. Financial representations, the seller's gotta let you know what their situation is. If whatever the listing price is in the listing agreement, the seller believes that they're gonna be able to pay off all of their liens and move forward, that's fine, that's the box on line 112. If the seller believes based on the listing price that they may not be able to pay off all of their liens and they don't have any money to come up with the differential, then you would need an addendum, and that's called the short sale pre-foreclosure addendum. And you would attach that to the listing agreement. If you get into a situation where you need a short sale pre-foreclosure addendum, please remember there are two short sale pre-foreclosure addendums. One is for the listing agreement. One is the form that you would use for the listing agreement. When a seller says, I'm gonna be underwater, or this might be a short sale. The other one is when the buyer is making an offer on a property that is currently a short sale. There's an addendum that you have to use. So if you are using either one, please just read. It says right on the top in the title which is supposed to be. One is for the listing agreement, and then one is for when a buyer is purchasing property. If the seller has acquired the property through foreclosure, the seller must give you authorization to utilize foreclosed property or foreclosed or brought out of foreclosure in your marketing. Don't know if there's a reason to do it. Once the seller has bought the property out of foreclosure, usually they do something to it before they put it back on the market, so I don't know if it's necessary to identify it as foreclosed. There's no liability for not. If any of the representations made above change for any reason, the seller agrees to immediately notify the broker in writing and update the financial representations as appropriate. That's lines 123 through 125. What that's saying is that if something happens and the seller's financial situation changes, they have an obligation to tell you. Because if it goes into a short sale situation or pre-foreclosure situation, you would then have to amend the listing agreement to include the short sale pre-foreclosure addendum.
Right.
You also need that information for marketing and to understand the situation that you're going to be approaching if it does turn into a less positive transaction. Broker's obligations, what we want the seller to let us know, or that the seller agrees to, is the utilization or not using a standard Northeast Florida lockbox, and that's those blue lockboxes. Please be prepared to talk to the seller about the importance of using a standardized lockbox. One, there are a lot of security features that go along with our standard super lockboxes, but in addition to that, it makes showing the property much easier. The non-standard lockboxes that contain the combinations can easily be broken into and don't record who's opened them and when they close them. So you need to make sure that you're using good decisions when it comes to the safety of the seller, as well as ensuring the integrity of what your business is doing. If something goes missing from a house on a standard lockbox, you can't tell who was the last person in and who was the last person out. You can't go back to the last appointment. Can't be sure. With a super lockbox, you know exactly who the last person who was that opened that lockbox. So if it wasn't someone that opened the lockbox, it was someone that accessed the property that the seller gave access to.
Yeah.
So it's a safety concern for you too.
We have tried to enter on the property. We're trying to figure out. I think we're having a hard time getting it open.
Really, I've had this.
We got connected.
I know.
We got connected like 3 or 4 times.
Yes.
I'm wondering if the seller, this agent, was able to see that we were trying to. We
So
got
I was like,
connected 4 times.
oh, I don't know why it's not pulling. I think I have to try it again. I don't know, like my first time.
Is this
Sure.
the super
And
lock?
the super, yeah.
Oh, no, I haven't had trouble with that one.
And then, so I'm like trying to access the key again and everything. And then when I went back, we got in. He was able to do it. And when I looked back, it said all the times that I entered for a showing, and it was like within 1 minute of each other. But was that visible on their end? Yeah.
The agent will be able to see how many times we tried.
Yes, so when your key connects to the box, that's when the notification occurs.
When the phone attached to the box.
When your lockbox key or your phone connects to the box, that's when the notification occurs.
See, there's a time limit too, so maybe you're getting timed out or something.
I was assuming that, but I think
It's not a time limit. What happens is if you push the box and you don't push it enough so it pops out, it records that as a show, as you getting access. And then when you go to try and get it out again, it's now saying you're going to try and access it again.
So what was I doing wrong? I think I wasn't pushing it hard enough.
You've got to kind of push up until it clicks and then release it and it pops out. The other challenge sometimes is when people put keys into the lockbox. Is when we put keys into the lockbox. Sometimes it sticks. It makes it hard to get in and out, and you have to kind of pull a little bit. So it's not uncommon to have a little bit of difficulty, but after you push and let go, it should be. Excuse me 1 second. Erica, is Jesse still around?
Yes.
No one ever knows.
There's some space up here.
Okay. Karen? 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 Do you want that table? No, you don't. I'm just trying to. Oh, okay. All right. As long as everybody's good. Okay.
You guys have a lockbox. We can go.
Sure. I want to.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. You guys have it.
Yeah. No problem. So we really recommend using the NEFAR lockbox just because of security and safety for everybody. So the seller authorizes the broker to withhold verbal offers and withhold all offers after the seller accepts the purchase and sale agreement. So you and your seller have to have a discussion about how they want to manage offers that come in verbally and how offers are managed once you are under contract. So withholding verbal offers, I don't know, what are your thoughts?
I think everything should be disclosed.
In writing?
I mean, I would prefer everything in writing, but are you asking what if you should tell the seller?
Yeah,
I think you should.
I agree.
So in our offers, I would told her, oh no, actually, if you check that box, offers I would told her.
If the seller says, look, I don't want to see any verbal offers, and so you check that box, the seller's telling you if you get a verbal offer, they don't want to hear about it. I'm going to tell you right now, if a seller says, I don't want to hear about verbal offers, I don't care what they are, I don't want to hear about them, still tell your seller when you get a verbal offer. Why? You want your seller to know that you're working to get it on paper for them. 2, you don't ever want your seller to find out about a verbal offer that potentially came in that you didn't tell them about. And just like every cocktail party, just like every bowling tournament, they're going to be there with someone who probably made that offer. And someone's going to say, I can't believe you wouldn't even respond when they find out which house they really own. And it's much better coming from you rather than the seller coming back to you and saying, I don't understand why you didn't tell me about that. And for you to go, oh, well, you checked the box. They don't care
Right, I know.
that they checked the box. So whether they agree for you to see verbal offers or not, I'm going with Jessica. You tell them about everything. Same thing with offers after you're going under contract. Another offer comes in, tell them about it. If they want to see it, it's their right to default on the contract. It's not your decision. So you need to make sure. Karen, I wasn't saying you had to move. I was just saying that if you wanted more space and you wanted to be around them,
No, it's
you're welcome.
yeah. I'm gonna move even though they told me not to.
The seller authorizes the broker and the broker agrees to. So these are some of our obligations. Photograph the property again. We can, we don't have to. Video the property, use drone. Remember, you gotta be in compliance with any laws or regulations around that property. And place the property photographs and videos in Northeast Florida MLS. Please note that once you place photos in MLS, the photos become the property of MLS. You want them. They watch for photos that get stolen. And they're watermarked. Watermarked. So now this just happened actually today. We got a call about a house that they have listed, and they were asking about it being a rental. The property wasn't available for them. Someone had taken the pictures off of MLS and had put it onto SwipSwap as a rental. And we're trying to get money.
Oh my God.
Scam.
This happened, I was teaching a class, and the young lady after class came up to me and said, "Can you help me please? You know, I know you're in real estate, right?" And I said, "Yeah." I was teaching in aerobics class. And she said, "Can you help me? You're in real estate, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "You know, we sent in a $500 deposit on a house that we were interested in. They told us they were gonna send us the keys, but we still haven't received the keys, and we're supposed to move in next week." And I said, please tell me you didn't see this on Craigslist." And she said, "Well, yes, how did you know?" And I said, "Okay, we need to find you a place right away. You're never getting your money back." I said, "I'll help you find a rental. You owe me nothing, but we gotta get you another place. That house is never gonna come to be." It was a house that had been taken off of MLS. Somebody wrote a story, you know, I'm military, we're renting this house for less than market value because we need to make sure we cover our payment. We're moving to Texas. Call us or write us an email and we'll send you information. If you're interested, just send us a check for $500 to hold the property and we'll send you the keys.
Oh.
So how does the MLS protect the pictures?
They watermark them. They put the MLS logo on them. So if anybody steals them,
But people can start screening,
they
crop
can
it
crop
out.
them. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just a matter of a service that you provide to your seller that you remember to tell your seller about. That you say, "I put every listing on a Google search that automatically notifies me anywhere that listing is, and I do a search on your address every week or every other week, whatever you want to do, to see if your property has been placed somewhere that we didn't intend."
We're doing that, or
You should, yeah,
I didn't know that. Okay.
you should.
Search Google, like Google Photos. Yeah.
No, just Google the address. It'll pop up everywhere that it's listed, and if you see it on a site that wouldn't normally contain your listing, like Craigslist, like SwipSwap, like what's that one? Neighborhood something or other,
I know what you mean,
where people bitch about things all day long.
yeah.
Is that
Watch,
like
I forget.
the social media?
Yeah, watch for it wherever it pops up. Take a look.
Neighborhood? Is that what you call it? What is it talking about?
I have it.
Next door neighbor.
Next door neighbor.
Who is it?
Is that
Which
it?
Next door.
Next
That's
door.
that's the one.
Something.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you gotta watch for it. You gotta be careful. So it's your responsibility.
I
It's
did
your
not.
listing, right?
Can I ask you a question if you mind?
No, of course.
So we were looking, because you said about MLS Advantage where it will have the St. John's properties there also. Because we're looking in St. John's to buy, we were at MLS Advantage looking and we're noticing that one property would be listed in both places. How do we do that?
So, St. John, St. Augustine County Board of Realtors shares all of their listings with MLS Advantage. Real MLS shares all of their listings with MLS Advantage. So if the realtor is a primary of one board and a secondary of the other board, they put it into both boards' MLS systems, and so therefore it appears twice in MLS Advantage.
But we can't do that in NEFAR. Can we? Do
Yes,
we have
when you
secondary?
put, you don't have secondary to St. John's unless you've paid to be secondary in St. John's.
But you could be.
As
But
long
you're
as the
saying that you don't.
brokerage is a secondary member.
Okay.
The brokerage just has to be a member of the board, and then you would be a secondary member.
We don't have it.
We don't have that. But all of your listings are in MLS Advantage, so anyone from St. John's can see your listing in MLS Advantage. It just wouldn't appear twice.
Yeah.
Good?
Mhm.
Okay. You good over there?
I know that one, yeah.
Okay. Good. As part of our responsibility, we report to MLS the financing in terms of the sale. We provide timely notice of changes or status changes to MLS. We can place appropriate signs on the property if permissible. Remember, you have to check HOA and HOA guidelines if the property is within an HOA. Advertise the property as the broker deems advisable, except if limited in paragraphs 4 or 5 hereof, and that's part of the listing agreement. If the broker desires, order and obtain all items necessary to close on the sale of the property, including but not limited to title insurance, survey map, municipal lien search, and home warranty. This is the segment that gives you the right to make all the phone calls to make sure that the seller's doing what they're supposed to do. So whether you're working with the buyer or the seller, you're responsible for making sure every single task from contract to closing happens. And both the listing agreement and purchase and sale agreement give you the right to do that.
Is there like a cheat sheet of all the things that, all the 67 things that we need to do?
Yeah, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a spreadsheet that you can put a date in and a lot of the other pieces come up. But for example, under loan approval, it doesn't tell you, don't forget to ask if they've turned in their bank statements. Did they turn in their W-2s? Did they turn in their 1099s? But it's the base of it.
Okay.
At broker's option, use the seller's name in connection with marketing. If you choose to, that's up to you. Obtain any information relating to the present encumbrances on the property and association items. So again, you have the right to check what's going on with the property. The seller represents and warrants that the seller is fully authorized to license the listing content as contemplated by and in compliance with this agreement. Seller hereby grants Northeast Florida, NEFAR, and the broker the irrevocable and unlimited right to license, use, publish, reproduce. Okay. This paragraph is a hold harmless paragraph, which puts the seller on notice that we're going to be using photos, videos, other means to market their property, and it's saying that the seller understands that and they can't come back and sue us. The seller can sue for whatever they want to sue for.
Yeah.
So we try to cover everybody and put everybody on notice, but if a seller's upset, a seller's upset. We just have to figure out why. And this part in bold here under 153, the seller understands and agrees that public websites determine their own content and use of data, and therefore Northeast Florida MLS, NEFAR, and the broker have no control over any electronic display and no obligation to remove any of the above content from any electronic display at any time. You can control MLS. That's about it. When you have a listing, you can go into Zillow and claim the listing so that you have the ability to work with the listing. Maybe change pictures if old photos are appearing in Zillow. As the listing associate, you can go in, claim the listing in Zillow under your professional account, and then make changes, verbiage changes, photo changes
Oh, I didn't know that.
to the listing, but only during the listing period. Once the listing ends, you have no right to change anything on that property. So let's say that you sell a house to an individual and the house was dated. So they did some wonderful things to the house, have renovated it and love the house, but now they're upset because old photos of their property are appearing in Zillow. And they call you and say, you need to change this. I'll send you the photos, you need to change this. We don't want those old photos in there, or take them down so that other people don't see our house the way it used to look. You can't do anything about it. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that as the owner of the property, they can go into Zillow and claim the property as the owner of the property and then make the changes themselves. But you can't.
Oh, we can't. Oh, I thought you said we
After
can.
closing, you can't. You can only make changes during the listing
Oh, after
period.
closing, okay.
But the owner can.
Yeah.
So while the listing property, they can go and change it.
While the property's listed, you can make changes to it, to the way it looks on Zillow.
The owners can.
You can, as the listing associate, and the owners can if they have already claimed their property. After the listing is closed, and you're no longer the listing agent, you can't make any changes to the property.
So just saying the property wasn't after so that's when they came back and said, hey, this is still there. So,
You can't make any changes. See, so we've got the property out there. The seller authorizes us to display all listing content relating to the property on any electronic display without restriction, except that information deemed confidential by Northeast Florida MLS. When you collect data or information to put into MLS on the property that you're going to list, there's a lot of information you collect. The majority of it's public information or public knowledge. There are pieces that are considered private. Compensation is considered private. Sorry, compensation was considered private. After November of last year, National Association of Realtors requires that any public-facing website contain buyer compensation or buyer brokerage compensation also. So it's no longer private. There could be other fields that are considered private that wouldn't go in the syndication out to all of the different websites. What this is saying between the difference between item number 1 and item number 2 on lines 158 and 160 is the displaying of the address.
Oh,
So that's the difference. Line 1 or option 1 says we're going to display everything public that we can, including the address. Option 2 says we're going to display everything that we can on the property, but not the address.
what do most people do? One?
Well, here, understanding the difference is also important. If you select 2, or if the seller says, look, I really don't want my address out there, you have to have a heart-to-heart with them and say, I gotta be honest with you, how hard is it to get an address, really? Because also, one of the disadvantages to saying I don't want the address on it is that certain websites won't take the listing if they aren't allowed to display the address.
Oh, okay.
So we wanna make sure
That's
that
why
the,
people pick one.
right. So most of the time people pick 1 because they want their listing to go to as many places as possible.
Well, one problem we had was, with the properties, we had cancellation because they saw they had the property listed for some. So, this is like,
But the reason why they chose that property is because their daughter lives the block down. So they would have seen the picture that's for sale and recognized it, not needing the address. So they didn't go searching for it. But yeah, they ended up canceling their November month stay because they saw it on the market.
with the $5,000 cancellation.
But remember, their agreement would stick with the property.
That's what I was telling them, but they said, how do you can't guarantee that it's gonna be short sale, short-term rental, you know.
Like they said.
You can't guarantee that it's gonna be short-term rental, but you were correct. The seller would have to, the buyer would have to agree to the lease terms for the people who are staying in the property, or pay them to get out. Or ask you to pay them to get out.
Well, Airbnb will allow you to cancel all of your reservations after the date of closing with
Oh.
no penalties, or we'll just relocate them.
Okay. But if they were already there,
If they're already there,
yeah,
yeah. Right,
and the buyer would have to agree to that.
right,
So they were protected,
yeah.
but I understand. And the third option is that the seller does not authorize the broker to display the listing content relating to the property on an electronic display, except internally within the Northeast Florida MLS system. The seller understands and acknowledges that if the seller has selected this option, consumers who conduct searches for listings on an electronic display will not see information about the property in response to their search. And here's why. If I'm only allowing it to be displayed in Northeast Florida MLS and not allowing it to be syndicated, when they do searches on the internet, the property's not going to pop up because it's only available within MLS. See, if the seller withholds consent for the listing content display on all electronic displays except the broker's site, so a seller can say, look, I don't want it in MLS. And if they say I don't want it in MLS, what do we have to add to the listing? What form?
That entry waiver, wait.
Waiver of entry.
Waiver, sorry.
Correct. Waiver of entry. So if they don't want it in MLS, you have to have the waiver of entry. They can say, I don't want it in MLS. Bugs?
I have this little nap flying around me.
Sorry.
That's not part of my sign language.
So I don't want it in MLS, but I only want it on your brokerage site. Excuse me. Then that prohibits it from being included in MLS because remember, on our brokerage site, we don't identify compensation. And part of MLS is the guarantee of cooperation and compensation. So you want things in MLS. So you can see your choices are 1 or 2 or 3. Most of the time, 1 is going to be the one that gives you the greatest amount of exposure. On line 170 it says, if either box 1 or 2 above is marked, so if 1 or 2 is marked, you got to deal with the rest of this. Then the seller must complete both of the following 2 selections. The first option is that the seller does or does not allow electronic display to perform an automated evaluation model or AVM. What's the most common AVM out there?
Is that talking about like this estimate? Yeah.
Is estimate. So here's the other thing. If your seller says, I don't want my property any place that provides an estimate of value, it's not going to appear on any of the major websites.
Oh,
Every website pretty much deals with real estate has an estimate of value on it. Not going to go anywhere. The second option starts on the next page.
What about the history? You know, like how much the people I said show the history.
Is that property
Sales history.
Yeah, sales history.
Yes. Is there a way you could eliminate that? Isn't that no? On the website.
Not all websites have it, but you can't eliminate it from websites that do offer it.
Yeah, I'm just saying where some homes don't have that history. Might be because homes just sold time long or something.
Yeah, if it's sold more than about 10 or 15 years ago, the history may not show up, but a lot of the websites are taking fairly extensive history at this time. And a lot of the history doesn't have to go that far back either. If the seller does not allow third-party comments, in other words, if the seller doesn't allow someone to write comments after they've seen the house on the property, that's fine, they have that option, but that means it will probably be eliminated from a lot of sites also. Zillow will not take a listing that does not allow an estimate of value or comments.
oh,
So comments, I thought that meant on Zillow you can say, I saw it and this is what my experience was on Zillow. Is that what you're talking about?
No. So a consumer can find a house, go see a house, and then write a comment about their experience of viewing the house, or what they thought of the house.
And putting it where?
On the website, whatever website allows third-party comments. And Zillow allows third-party comments. So if you don't allow your property to have third-party comments, Zillow will eliminate your listing.
Wow.
Is that it?
Wow. So people would take the time to actually go on Zillow and say, hey, I saw this house and
It sucks.
yeah. I've
Oh,
never
maybe
seen
to
that.
try and reduce the
Right.
attraction, and then they are more desperate.
This is why I really recommend that whenever you have a listing, that you regularly Google the address and that you regularly check the websites on which it appears to see if any comments have been written so that you can respond to them, or at least say thank you so much. I'm so sorry that you had that experience. The sellers are very concerned, and we are addressing this, or something, just to be able to respond. I mean, we all know how valuable reviews can be. Seller obligations. So in addition to us having obligations to the seller has obligations to us. They agree to cooperate. It's a good thing. But sometimes they don't want to. They agreed to provide us with keys. Now sometimes a seller has a requirement that you be available at all showings. You have to be prepared for that.
And what is their reasoning behind that usually?
Safety, security.
Yeah.
They don't want people just wandering through their homes. I mean, even with a realtor.
Right.
So they prefer that you're there. Oftentimes, it's also because who's going to know the most about the property other than the seller? The listing agent. So the seller wants representation at a showing and wants you to share with the buyer or potential buyer all the good things they've done.
The house is not itself, the house can't tell. Hey.
We just went to a showing where the realtor was there, and I would have done things differently. I feel like she kind of like guided us to where she wanted us to go in that order, and it's just not my style. But it's funny because I mean the things she said were good. She was just like, this is a more traditional furnishings, but just imagine your stuff there. That's what. And this is another thing is that she listed it with virtually staged furniture. I was like, really, the furniture was not horrible, but it would look better staged. Is that something that we can do?
Absolutely. So there's a company called Box Brownie.
Box Brownie.
Brown.
Box Brownie.
Don't say brown to them.
Oh, I'm hungry.
I know. Me too. Anyway, what they do is they can work with photos that you give them. So for example, if you have a house that is vacant,
Yeah.
they can virtually stage it. If you have a house that you have ideas on for renovation, they can show that renovation. If you have a house that has cluttered countertops and you want to show someone a picture without a lot of that clutter, they can alter the photos. Please note, if you put those in MLS, you must identify them as virtual or you must identify them as altered, and you should have a photo of the way the home really looks before or after the photo of staged, to ensure that the consumer does not believe that they're getting what you have altered.
That's what I've seen.
What's the point of the visual? If you can see an actual picture.
What's
Better than nothing. He's saying, what's the point if you're gonna show them what it really looks like, and then you show them what it doesn't look like? Does it just?
Because the first showing always takes place online, and it's considered false advertising to show only altered photos versus photos that are current versus photos that are altered in
So
connection.
we can't just disclose visual footage and
You have to disclose its version.
but that's what I'm saying. If we could just
Rather
do
than
that
having
instead of
before and after.
showing them the actual picture.
No, you have to have the actual
That
also.
work.
You cannot have only altered photos.
Does it matter which order? Virtually first? No, it doesn't matter.
You just have to have them available.
So it's best to do it the clean one first. And then that's my thing.
I mean, you could even put 6 altered photos followed by 6 actual photos, and it would be acceptable. I prefer that you put them next to each other, but you could do 6 virtual, and then 6 actual, as long as it's the same rooms. So a consumer knows. The reason I wouldn't want you to, I would not recommend putting 6 and then 6 or 3 and then 3, is because if they don't go far enough in your photos, they may have an unrealistic expectation of the property. And that's considered an advertising violation.
You gotta protect yourself. That's a good idea.
You really do. And a consumer appreciates it when they understand that this is what it looks like versus what we got.
It sets them up to be prepared for that when, if they didn't see that, they probably would still be interested either way if they like the virtual photos. But then when they would see the home, they're ready to not see something amazing and they can still conceptualize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better to show them
Disclose.
their life. Yes.
Okay. So provide keys, we know that. Make the property available to the buyer, buyer's representatives, buyer's broker, buyer's licensed inspectors or contractors, and appraisers for inspections and investigations during the time provided in a purchase and sale agreement, and to keep utilities active until closing. Everybody remember what the standard timeline is for inspections?
10 days.
10 days, correct. Keep the utilities active until closing. This can sometimes be a challenge, especially if someone's in a difficult situation and has moved on. Sometimes they turn the utilities off. You can get courtesy turn-ons from most power companies. However, most utility companies will not turn on the utility unless they know that the house is safe and secure. So, be prepared to deal with potentially some challenging situations when it comes to inspections. The seller does agree to inform the broker prior to leasing or mortgaging or otherwise encumbering the property. This includes HELOCs or home equity lines of credit, because a home equity line of credit can potentially put the seller into a short sale situation. If they're taking a home equity line out. They indemnify and hold the broker, Northeast Florida and NEFAR, harmless from all losses, damages, costs, and expenses of any nature, including reasonable attorney's fees. Again, this is a secondary hold harmless section for us. We're going to jump down to G, which is comply with the Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. That's the disclosure that if you are a seller who's a foreign investor, you must disclose at least 10 days prior to closing, and some of your proceeds may be held to ensure that you've paid your taxes. We have to abide by all and comply with all mandatory disclosure requirements imposed by federal and state laws and regulations, and by local ordinances, including but not limited to pertaining to noise and airport notice zones, energy efficiency, radon gas, lead-based paint. This is in paragraph 13 of the purchase and sale agreement. So everything works together. Excuse me. To execute, we're under I, execute a statutory general warranty deed. Trustees, personal representatives, or guardian deed is appropriate to the status of the seller. This may sound familiar from the purchase and sale agreement, page 1. J is relatively new over the last 4 years, but very important to remember. The seller agrees to not engage in any audio recording of anyone, including but not limited to a buyer, a buyer's representative, a buyer's broker, inspectors, appraisers, when any of them are on the property without the seller obtaining the advance written notice of all persons affected. In accordance with Florida Statute 934, you must obtain the consent of all persons affected for audio recording, and for video, the seller should post a written notice in a conspicuous place stating that a video surveillance system has been installed for the purpose of security for the premises when a person has a reasonable expectation of privacy.
So where do you put that remarks?
Okay, so agents are putting in private remarks, seller has audio and video security system, or Seller has security system with video for security purposes only. However, the law states that if someone should expect privacy, you have to get them to sign that they know that there's audio recording going on. So if I have a Ring doorbell, if I have Alexa, Google, Home, if I have a Ring floodlight, I am supposed to put in the home, the listing associate is supposed to put in the home, when someone enters the home, a form that says, please note there is audio and video recording occurring on this property. And the individual, including the agent who's showing the property, is supposed to sign acknowledging that that is occurring.
What if you say that it does not have, or it does have? Where does it say?
So the next part is correct, 200, line 200, you acknowledge whether the property does or does not have.
So if you disclose that you do have this, you don't have to get that written.
No, this is a disclosure to us, the brokerage, that the seller has audio recording occurring on the property. That's not enough acknowledgement for the buyer who's going to be coming through the property. The person coming through the property is supposed to written acknowledge that they understand that audio recording is occurring on the property.
Can they sign that at the time that they're requesting a showing instead of at the property?
The showing is requested by the listing agent.
Oh,
Okay, here's the thing, our shop has this camera also. So my question is, when we get shown, are we supposed to get some interest from them?
Is it video only?
video and audio.
Supposed to get a signature.
So if you just own a Google Home or something, that thing's not,
It's listening.
yeah, but you don't have access to what it's listening to, really. So everybody has a Google Home or Alexa of some sort. So I've never signed a form going through any.
I know.
Um,
Lazy realtors.
and I've never seen it I think I've seen it once in remarks.
I know.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's good, man. So I understand, but it's too much work for them to get a piece of paper saying it and actually see it says on here, video.
Well, this is the listing agreement. So this is the agreement between the seller and the
Right.
brokerage.
Right,
So the seller is putting us, the brokerage, on notice that they have audio and video recording occurring.
but it's not really implying them, that's why you put
It's
it.
not putting the buyer on notice.
Right.
So some realtors have been putting it into private remarks in MLS, and while that's definitely a positive step, how do we know that that realtor told the buyer that there's audio recording going on? Secondarily, the law states that if there is a reasonable expectation for privacy, that you, the individual whose rights are being violated, must acknowledge that you were aware that audio recording is going on.
Do you have a standard form for that already made up?
Just a spreadsheet, yes. That they just,
Is that in app files?
I don't know if that's in app files. I don't know if I've
Might
put it
as
in
well
app
just
files
print
yet.
that out. Put it in any time.
Anybody that's been,
Yeah.
Well, I've never seen it. I've never seen that. I've asked about it.
I've never heard about this.
Well, most people don't. Most people don't do it. To be honest with you, I have asked another gal who works with us. She said, "Well, I have a little sign, but there was no sign in."
So if there's only video, no audio,
Right.
then a sign is fine.
Yeah, a sign is fine, but everyone has those Google Homes, Google Alexa things. Everybody does.
I'm just telling you what the law states.
Weird.
So somebody could get sued.
Yeah. Waiting for it.
Yikes.
Waiting for it. Here's the thing. If you do your job well, there's not going to be an issue. So if you say to your buyers, I'm so excited that I get a chance to show you this house. Here's my process. When we go into the house, we go quiet. I want you to walk, take notes, look, see. I don't want you talking to me about the house. I want you to really look at the house, investigate the house, kind of feel it out, see what it's all about. And then, when we get in the car, we'll talk about it. Because I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what you have to say. I don't even want you guys talking about it. Take notes. Make it a game. Make it fun for them. Protect your customer. The majority of agents aren't putting these registrations in the homes, which you can see it says right here. They're supposed to get in writing an acknowledgement that an individual knows that they're being audio recorded. And we're not doing it. So you take control. Control your buyers, and you won't be able to. They'll get excited about the living room or whatever. But here's how the information has been used. It's been used in negotiation. A seller watches a video, sees that a buyer's excited, they make a low offer, the seller uses the information to try and get them up in their price. It's an unfair advantage.
Right.
So, in addition, it's also been used against realtors. We had an agent that was doing an open house for another realtor. They were in the house. Agent did exactly what they were supposed to do. Welcomed a potential buyer, talked with the potential buyer about the house, allowed the potential buyer to go ahead and tour the home. And when the potential buyer came back to her, she said, so what do you think? Does this meet your needs? And the woman who was the buyer said, not really, it's really very nice, but it's not what I'm looking for. And so the agent did what she was supposed to do. Started talking to the buyer about, are you currently working with a realtor? Tell me a little bit more about what you're interested in. Tell me if this is the right area for you. Did exactly what she was supposed to do. So while she's talking to the potential buyer, her cell phone rings, and it happens to be the listing agent. So she said, I'm sorry, if you'll excuse me just a minute, it's the listing agent. Let me just make sure there's nothing wrong that I need to take care of. Woman said, fine. She walked into the kitchen, took the call. Listing agent said, hi, I need you to leave the home immediately, and I need you to ask the buyer, potential buyer, to leave the home also. You are to lock up the home and not return. And the agent was, and she was a newer agent, so she was freaked out. She said, what's wrong? She said, the seller has a camera in the home and has been listening to you and is insulted that you aren't trying to sell her home and therefore wants you out of the home now.
Not really. This happened to one of our agents?
Not who's with at a previous brokerage that I was at. But she came in to talk to me and she was freaked out. She said, what did I do wrong? I said, you did nothing wrong.
No, she didn't.
And the listing
Especially if they
agent
said
didn't
this doesn't
prepare.
meet my needs. I mean, that should have dropped right there.
No. The seller was pissed that the agent wasn't trying to sell her home. Was wasting her time in her property trying to get a buyer. Which is exactly what you're supposed to do at open houses.
But there are a lot of people
The
that have
agent-
a lot of cameras now. I mean, it's, watching their pets and doing all kinds of things, and it's all over the place.
Disclose,
I know,
disclose.
I know.
Put the form there. If they choose not to sign that, at least you had it there.
I have never seen
Put
that.
it into
before.
private remarks.
Well, I can see putting it in private remarks, but
And
I've
then
never
put the
seen
form there. Lay it there.
Yeah,
if they
just
choose
lay it
not
there.
to sign it, that's not your fault.
it. Yeah.
You made it available. You did what you were supposed
Because
to
most
do.
people, to be honest with you, in an open house don't want to sign anything. They don't, they're just looky-loos, or they're just in the neighborhood and they go, oh, I'm not signing
And
anything.
free food.
Free food, whatever. That's true. So a lot of them will avoid the sign-in sheets.
Which is okay. It's
Yeah.
just do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah,
Right?
you're right.
And guess what? Tell your sellers.
But make sure, I mean, if I could be so pushy, make sure that form is in app files, because otherwise I'll forget it. I won't be able to get it.
Okay.
At
So
the last minute, all of a sudden you go, oh, you could just drop it out.
Nothing else, just take a piece of paper and says there are audio and video recording going,
Yeah, that's
acknowledge
true.
below.
I just like it to look nice, you know?
Anyway, so the seller needs to identify whether or not one or both of those exist on the property.
Interesting.
Lines 204 on, we're talking about what is currently restricting the property or what additional fees are required for the property, whether it's a homeowners association, a master association, if any capital contributions are currently being requested, any association or maintenance assessments that are current or possible, providing the information on who they would contact if they have questions, condominium or homeowners association special assessments, CDD fees. So if any of these exist, it's your responsibility to let them know. So the seller needs to tell you so you can put it in the right place in MLS.
How do we verify it?
You can verify by calling the homeowners association, would be the best way. You bring up a really good point. You should make sure, especially with a condominium, that you have the most recent covenants and restrictions. Remember, with condos, on resale condos, the buyer has 3 days from the date of receipt of the covenants and restrictions to back out. So if you provide the covenants and restrictions on a condo to a potential buyer after the inspection period, they can still back out and not be in default.
After inspection period, they have extra money.
If you don't provide them the covenants and restrictions during the inspection period, you don't provide them until after the inspection period, you've just given them another 3 days to back out.
Then if I'm good, 3 days before closing, still counts.
Correct. 3 days starts from the day they receive the covenants and restrictions on a condo, resale. So if I don't give you the covenants and restrictions, I forget, and I don't give them to you till 10 days before closing, and you say, I don't like these, you can get out and not be in default. It's 15 days on new construction, condo. Identify who the entities are that are receiving the monies, whether it's the CDD or the HOA. You can check CDD fees
Is that an MT?
online.
Is that an MT?
You can go into MMT and use one of the links to connect to the county website where it's located, but no, the CDD fees are not identified, nor are the HOA fees identified on the primary page in MMT.
I know about the HOA, that's what I was asking.
Ooh, there's one other thing. If the seller is entitled to retain any of the binder deposits, then as liquidated damages, the brokerage can retain 50% of those funds. So in other words, if a buyer defaults and the seller gets the binder deposit, we, the brokerage, are entitled to 50%. We rarely ever take any money out of a liquidated damages or out of a dispute over a binder. Compensation, cooperation. I don't know why we put this on paragraph 8 instead of way earlier in this document. This talks about what we're going to be paid by the seller. So you need to change that 195 to 250 on
It is, the
line
new,
227.
It says 195.
Right.
So, is that the updated amount?
No, it's 250.
Oh, okay, guys, it's 7%.
That's right. So yeah, you want to change the 195 to 250. And
Now, can we, before we change, let's say we ask for 5, they wanna do 5%, it's $1 million home and they wanna do 5%. We go through you to get the okay, right? Or can we actually say to them, I can make that happen?
no, our new policies give you the exact guidelines, and you have the right to make any changes that you feel are necessary as long as you understand the repercussions. So, in other words, did you read them?
I know I do, I printed out the signature page, but I didn't get through all of it yet.
Okay.
So basically, can you give me a synopsis of that? in other words, can I go ahead, because most people
You
are
can.
at,
Okay, our policies state
yeah,
right here,
Oh, okay.
our policies state right here
oh,
that these are our company policies related to commission. So our company policy on anything under 500 is 6%. If you choose to reduce the commission, you have the right to do that up to 0.5%, and we will participate.
okay,
If you go beyond 0.5%, you just owe the difference in the company dollar for that side of the commission.
okay, so under 500 is, what does it say, 6%, and I
So-
can go down to 5.5, right?
Right?
And anything more
If
than
you
that,
choose to go beyond that, you have the right to
I
do that.
end up paying out of my side, is what you're saying,
The company dollar.
correct?
So that gets confusing.
No, I think that's clear.
Well, let me just make sure we're okay. And there's an example in the book too.
Oh,
But if the policy is 6%, but I list it at 5.5,
mhm,
which means in most cases I kept 3 and gave away 3. In this case, usually it would be 2.75
right,
and 2.75,
mhm,
right?
mhm,
But if I chose to list this property at 5% and did it at 2.5 and 2.5,
yep,
I would just have to reimburse the company dollar difference between here and here. The company dollar is based on your split. So if you're at 80,
Yes.
if you're at an 80-20 split, then you would calculate 20% of this income versus 20% of this income, and that would be the differential that you would pay. You aren't paying 0.5%. You're paying
I understand,
the difference in the company dollar.
yeah,
Does that make sense?
yep,
So you have the right to adjust off of these standards.
yeah.
You just are aware that
Because the average right now is 2.5%. Well, I guess with most, depends on what area you're in.
depends on the price point of the property.
Correct, yeah,
So, if you go beyond the company guidelines,
gotcha.
that's up to you. You're just going to pay the difference in the company dollar.
Is that for buyer's agents also?
Yes. No.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's only for sellers.
If you have a buyer agency agreement, that would take care of the difference. However, whatever the seller is offering to compensate to the buyer's brokerage is what we accept. We can't negotiate with the seller unless, of course, the seller is our seller.
So if we accept something as a 1.5, which I've seen, we would just roll, I mean, you could try
There's
and get
nothing.
that, but we can't.
We would, whatever comes in, comes in. So there's no differential on company dollar, for a listed property or a for sale by owner. If you go to a for sale by owner and say, I've got a buyer, are you willing to compensate me for bringing a buyer to you? And they say, yes, we'll give you 2%. And the policy would customarily be at that price point 3%. We're not gonna say, okay, you owe us the difference in the company dollar between 2 and 3%.
Because you never got them, yeah, you never got it.
We didn't, it's whatever the seller is willing to do for us.
Yeah, we're always different only if the time seller side.
So if it's our listing is where you have to make up the differential.
Yeah.
I tell you, we're pretty generous. I don't know of another company that gives you a buffer that the company will actually participate in. So we'll participate up to the buffer. And here's something that we're adding because we get this question back is, well, what if I'm on both sides of the transaction? Can I reduce
Oh,
0.5?
right,
And so we're offering a 0.5% buffer on the sales side too.
So an additional 4-5.
So so if I'm on both sides of the transaction, technically I could reduce the property from a 6 to a 5% commission, 0.5% on each side. And the company would participate. If you go beyond that, the company wouldn't participate in the differential. Does that make sense?
You know, in
yeah, it
Chicago,
does. Yeah.
they strongly believe that buyer. The buyer's agent should get more commission than the seller agent. That way they can advertise, they can bring a buyer. So that if the percentage is 5%, they will get 3, and then the seller gets 2. Is that
Oh, the buyer's agent gets 2?
no opposite? The buyer gets 3.
Buyers
Whatever-
and
Whatever,
sellers.
whatever the split is, theirs is higher to,
For the person, for the brokerage that brings the buyer?
yeah, wait, for the buyer, say it
For
again.
the buyer's agent.
We'll
So
get
they
3,
would
so
get
there's
more money.
more it's incentive to bring the buyer in, yeah.
You guys don't do that here. Just do 100%. But
What we do at our brokerage, we can't talk about any other brokerage. It's against FTC guidelines.
I'm just trying to figure out.
So there are different strategies, of course, that everybody has. I had one agent that listed a property at 5% and did 2.5 and 2.5. However, she wasn't getting a lot of activity, so she felt it was necessary to increase the buyer's side. I'm going to tell you right now, it had nothing to do with the commission. It had to do with the way the property was being presented. So it wasn't the commission, because in the market at her price point, 2.5 co-op was pretty much
Pretty
was strong.
standard, yes, it
Was
it
strong
really
at that
is.
price point.
That's what I see
We're seeing-
90% of the time. 2.5.
Well, no, the average commission, the average co-op commission currently is about 2.65 to 2.75%.
Really?
That's the average. If you take the average co-op,
Okay, you're averaging, yeah.
yeah. So if you look at a particular price point, it can be more or less.
The co-op, what do you mean by the co-op?
The percentage that we as the brokerage pay the brokerage that brings the buyer. That's considered a co-op commission or cooperating commission.
Oh, okay. So, but with that strategy, I was just mentioning to I owe the company commission because I gave away commission to the other side.
Yeah, it would. If it goes beyond the boundaries of our policies, yes.
Interesting.
I don't think,
Just trying to figure out different strategy how to work.
Right. and I think, maybe I just need to ask the question, why are we going to the commission first?
It was a strategy that was recommended by a Florida realtor who we were working with when we first were looking in the area.
There's a strategy from them, but ours is a strategy from Chicago.
Yeah.
People have to.
Yeah,
They do that.
yeah, she was saying, price yourself right, and instead of touching the price, because that makes it look weaker, like we were saying before, go after the commission for the buyers.
Basically, instead of dropping the price, increase the commission on their side to bring in a buyer, because that's saying.
But if you weren't getting showings at a 2% co-op, what's going to incentivize someone to bring a buyer at 2.5? They're not going to bring a buyer that's not going to want the property.
Well, I mean, it's gonna increase the chance because they see a property and they're like, there's no commission. Let me show you this property before we get on the contract on this one. And then
That's
we'll
if
take a
you
look
have
at
a
it.
lot of
Okay, so-
inventory, but right now, you don't need to do that.
Well, and now we're talking ethics.
True, that's true.
Is it ethical to deny a buyer a property or to deny showing a buyer a property because of the commission?
Yes, I've seen that. Well, I saw that in California, but not here so far, but they will avoid a property that's, got, like 1% or 1.5%.
I don't disagree that if a brokerage places a low co-op, that it can impact the reputation of the agent and the brokerage. But I disagree that realtors will not show properties even with a low co-op. Because
Well, they'll pick the other ones first, though, I think.
they may pick the other ones first. But the buyer decides what property they're going to purchase.
Yeah.
Now, can I walk into a property that has a 1.5% co-op and say, oh, well, this is nice, But ooh, the walls look funny, and ooh, you're gonna have to do something with the kitchen. Ooh, that looks really wonky. And then go to the next house. Oh my gosh! And they
Oh
offer
my
2.5%. Oh, oh, this has everything you want. Could I do that? Of course I can. But I probably won't not show the property.
I don't,
That's
I
at the
really,
lower.
I look at it, but I go, ooh, you know, but I still show 'em.
And you know you have every right to negotiate the commission prior to ever showing the property.
Prior to showing the property though.
Once you've shown the property, you accept
I
the
know,
commission that's
I
being
know.
offered.
But before you show negotiate.
So you've seen 1.5? Have you seen the
I have.
$500?
Yes, saying that too.
No.
$1.
What?
You don't look at me like that.
What about doing this for $1?
Is that an error?
No, it's not.
But if you show that property, we like it that $1.
If you show it and don't negotiate it prior to, then you're accepting $1.
See, they probably are thinking you're not reading it all. I don't know. But again, there's
It's true,
ethics.
though.
Ethics. Then are you really going to show that property and go through all that work?
Well, why not say Mr. Ms. Buyer? I mean, if you've had a good discussion with your buyer about your professional fee and who pays it and what you deserve to get paid, or even an open discussion with them, you don't think they think that you should get paid? They think you should get paid. And now you're showing a property that's $1, or they ask to see a property that's $1. Why not be honest with them? You know, this is way below what I would customarily charge as a professional fee on this property. Do you think it's fair that I get 80% of $1? 80 cents to get you to close on this property? Okay, let's even use $500. So do you think it's fair that I get $400 for 80% of 500? Yeah, $400 to show you this property. Is that do you think that's fair compensation? No. Well, may I call and try to negotiate the commission? Sure. And then go back to them and say, well, they wouldn't negotiate the commission, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn you over to the listing agent and get a referral fee. Refer them to the listing agent, you'll get more.
Yes. So if I'm understanding this correctly, the
Oh, I
seller,
didn't think about that.
the seller agent gets a listener agreement with 5%, but then when he puts it on the MLS, he puts the buyer's agent as 1%. I mean $1.
Okay.
And then I'm assuming in that case, the reason why they're doing that is so they can get the whole 5% when they represent the buyer. Is that the strategy? Is that why you do that?
Most of the time when it's a flat fee, like $500 or a very low commission, it's usually an investor and or it's a pay-for-play brokerage. In other words, a seller goes to a brokerage and says, I would like you to put this into MLS. And they say, great, I'll charge you $500 to put this in MLS. But MLS requires a guarantee of cooperation and compensation. So what are you willing to offer the brokerage that brings the buyer? And they say, is $500 enough? And the brokerage says, sure, I can. You pay me $500 and I'll put it into MLS to show that you will pay $500. They have every right to say that. And because commissions can't be set across any guideline, if the seller then said, well, could I do it for $100? The brokerage has to say, yes, you could do it for $100. Now, we as a brokerage have policies, and these are our standards. If you choose to go off the standards, then you need to understand what the problem is, or what the repercussions are. Just like if you took in 6%, and this is the way it actually used to be, or, sorry, this is the way it was at brokerage I worked at when I first started. The standard commission was 6.5%. 3.5% stayed with the listing brokerage, and 3% was offered out to the brokerage who brought the buyer. Why? Because the brokerage who had the listing was paying for advertising, was paying to put it into MLS, was paying for all the marketing. So the greater percentage went to the brokerage that was listing the property. I'm not a big fan of increasing the co-op commission in order to try and generate additional traffic. I'm also not a big fan of bonuses to agents because it's the buyer that dictates what they want to see, or it's the buyer's desires that dictate the properties that you're going to take them to. So to incentivize a realtor to bring a buyer to your property, I don't know that it works unless the unless the realtor has a buyer interested in a property like that.
I have done this strategy in Chicago where I gave them a bonus if they bring a buyer. Okay.
Sure.
And I knew that I could always renegotiate the commission. So instead of
Renegotiate the commission.
So they bring a buyer. So
Right.
they bring a buyer,
Right.
10,000 less asking price. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna accept this offer, but because it's too low compared to my asking price, I'm not gonna pay you the extra. That's not wrong. And I had people walk away,
Of course.
but I'm literally accepting the offer. So how is that?
That's a buyer who's committed to their agent and committed to the compensation the agent is supposed to receive. So it depends on how you phrase it. If you say, I will provide $1,000 bonus at full price
Bring your
offer,
buyer before a certain date. I don't think we did that full price offer.
see, if you say I'll provide a bonus at full price offer, and then they bring you a full price offer and you don't provide the bonus, then that's a problem with the brokerage. Because even though you're the one who are willing to pay it, it's the brokerage that advertised it in MLS and has the obligation, because monies flow brokerage to brokerage. So if you then refuse to pay the $1,000, it falls to the brokerage. The brokerage has to figure out how to pay the $1,000 or to collect it from you. But if it wasn't a full price offer and you then refused to pay the $1,000 bonus, that's fine, because the stipulation was you would pay the $1,000 bonus on a full price offer. Does that make sense at all? Not really.
I just think with my situation that maybe they didn't represent the offer. Maybe I literally accepted the counter. That's what I don't understand.
But did you make the $1,000 bonus a part of the contract?
No, it was on the list of it.
Okay, and who was the $1,000 bonus to?
Actually, it was on this agreement with remarks.
So in
I
the
told my
remark,
broker,
Mhm.
paid him the extra 1,000.
Pay who the extra $1,000?
I think that's what you confused about. So the buyer agent.
Okay, so in MLS it said $1,000 bonus to the brokerage that brings the buyer
Yes, on a specific day. So someone.
by a certain date.
Yeah, like 2
Okay.
weeks. If someone did bring up an offer, I was gonna accept the offer, but I'm like, you know what, it's still low, but I'm gonna accept the offer, but I'm gonna remove $1,000 from the commission.
Okay, well, so if I'm understanding correctly, you said I'll accept the buyer's offer to go under contract with the buyer, but then you, as the seller, tried to renegotiate the compensation to the brokerage and the brokerage co-op.
Right. So my
Just to remove that, in the private remarks or something, or wherever when he made the offer of the bonus, that bonus just to the buyer's agent was removed. Well, he was trying to negotiate that.
Right. See, what I think that we're not getting clear is commission is not a part of the negotiation.
Why, but that's what I'm trying to explain. I think that's a good strategy, but at the same time, it's not a good strategy because Code of Ethics is trying to say, all of a sudden, the buyer is no longer interested because I'm removing $1,000 from the agent's commission.
The buyer could have said, yes, if that's what you're going to do is not agree to the compensation that you had already agreed to, then we, the buyer, are concerned about how our transaction is going to go with you, therefore we're going to walk away. They're completely separate. If, as the brokerage, you're the seller, and we agree that you're going to give me $1,000 to sell this house, then that's what I have to work with. I'm going to tell you I'm going to give a certain amount of that money to the person that brings the buyer or the brokerage that brings the buyer. If you then change it and say, well, in addition to that $1,000, I want you to offer another brokerage that brings the buyer an additional $1,000 just to them. I can say that, absolutely, but that's between you and me, and then MLS or the brokerage agreement or the compensation agreement that occurs in MLS between us, the brokerage A, and B, the brokerage that brings the buyer. So that buyer should never have been impacted by the fact that you were adjusting the commission. But once you negotiated, you're trying now to negotiate. Remember, your negotiation is with me, not with that brokerage. But once I change the terms of MLS, if that buyer's brokerage no longer brings their buyer, or their buyer then refuses because they're saying, whatever's going on in the background, while it doesn't impact our contract, could impact the way that we believe you'll act, then of course they can back out.
So,
But they're completely separate.
so as a buyer's agent, I share that information to the buyers, like, hey, you know, they're removing my commission, but I'm gonna make a work anyway for you. Do you share that information, or?
Well, I mean, this is why National Association of Realtors has said it's important that we discuss with the buyers what the compensation is, because too many agents are trying to deceive buyers and say to them, my services are free. Well, your services aren't free because you're still getting paid. But the money has to flow brokerage to brokerage. And part of the reason it has to do that is so that the negotiation that occurs between the buyer and the seller isn't impacted by the monies that are changing hands for compensation. So, but the code of ethics relates to your ethical obligation to show property. Can you set a policy in your personal business that you will not show property where the compensation is under 1.5%? Of course you can. You have to be prepared not to show that property then. Or you have to have buyer agency agreements signed with your buyer so that the buyer understands they pay the differential. So there are lots of options. It's what are we telling the buyers? What are we telling the sellers? How we, what are we offering? I feel like if you're going to, and this isn't a criticism, because there are a lot of people who do offer the bonuses, but if you're going to offer a $1,000 bonus, offer a $3,000 cut in price. Think of all the advantages. The price is less, so I do a small price reduction. It pops up again on the lists, the hot sheets that realtors have. Ooh, there's a price reduction. Oh, that could be interesting. And then, in addition, while it doesn't hugely impact, it does impact the base for tax calculations. It does impact your base for taxes.
That experience, after that experience, I'm like, it doesn't make sense to offer $1,000 bonus. Let's remove that. When I did that, traffic was less. So I thought it was weird.
That's
It was
interesting.
weird. That was weird because I didn't offer that in the first place. In the first 2 weeks, wasn't much traffic. I'm like, you know what? Let's go extra $1,000. And there was no traffic. And I had that experience. I'm like, it doesn't make sense. Take out $10,000. It was like, it was weird.
Yeah. Can't explain it. But, I mean, strategy-wise, I appreciate that you're at least looking to have a strategy in how you sell your property. What we have to look at is what are the other eyes that are viewing what you're doing. So is it, as a realtor, do you feel like that's enough to bring a buyer to that house? Well, if the buyer doesn't want a house like that, why would you be bringing them there? What's the motive? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Are
it
you all
does.
of a sudden going to find 17 buyers that want just that house so you can get the $1,000
Yes,
bonus?
right. That,
Now, when new construction offers a bonus, sometimes agents add that to their inventory to show. But I think you should start showing new construction with any buyer, because they'll find new construction without you, and then they'll cut you out. So compensation cooperation, good discussion, please change that to 250, it was increased as of April 15th. And then whatever the commission is that we take in customarily, we do 50-50. I will say more and more we are seeing our agents keep slightly more than half to cover a lot of their expenses. Everything has gone up in price. If no cooperating broker compensation is offered, the property cannot be placed in MLS. Remember, you love MLS because they protect you.
I have a question about 232. 3%
232?
to the non-representative broker. What does that mean?
The compensation that you offer co-op could be whatever it is. Most agents will offer roughly 50% to single agents and transaction brokers. Usually what you'll see in MLS is a much lower compensation to non-rep
Yeah.
brokerages because the liability is much greater for the brokerage with the listing because the brokerage representing the buyer has a no representation agreement with them. In other words, they don't represent them in any manner. They're just putting the paperwork together. So the liability ends up falling more to the listing side and the work falls more to the listing side. So they'll offer
I've seen it often
less.
as like 1%. I see it often as like 1%.
Yeah. It's a lot of those pay-for-play brokerages.
So like logos.
Sorry?
So like a logo on a jury.
Attorney, that'd be for an
Sure.
attorney.
For an attorney,
Like the representative would just be like an attorney doing this.
oh, the non-rep?
Yeah.
Well, it's a non-rep broker. So it's a real estate brokerage that works in the non-rep capacity. So there are 3 different types of representation. There's single agency transaction brokerage, which we've kind of touched on a little bit. The third option is non-rep. So a buyer can come to you and say, I don't want you to represent me, I just want you to put the paperwork together. And then there's a form that they sign that says you're a non-rep. And in this example, the compensation to a non-rep is 3%, but what you'll see in MLS most frequently is that the compensation to non-rep is, like Jessica said, 1%. So 235, we start talking about guarantee of cooperation. So we are guaranteed compensation if the property changes hands at all. Whether it was through eminent domain, whether it was through any type of title transaction change, we are guaranteed compensation. The only time we are not guaranteed compensation is if our listing agreement expires and the seller lists with another brokerage. Then we're not guaranteed cooperation or compensation. We are guaranteed compensation if the seller decides to go ahead and lease the property. So if during the listing agreement, the seller now says, look, nothing's happening, let's go ahead and lease it, and they lease it, we're entitled to compensation. And customarily, it's 10% of the gross rent paid, so it would be the monthly rent times 12, and that would be what 10% of that is what we would be entitled to. And that means you have to fill in the blank, or you have to fill in something under flat fee. Please don't leave these blank. You have no options if you leave them blank. If you don't put anything in there, how are you supposed to negotiate from there?
So don't do that, then you should put 10%.
Yeah, you should. We recommend 10% on the percentage, or a flat fee, and it would be an appropriate flat fee, usually somewhere in the vicinity of $1,500 to $2,000, depending on what the property leases for. But here's the deal: if I put something in there, at least I can negotiate. So if the seller says, I gotta rent this, we're not selling it, I can't keep this up. And you say, completely understand. And you say, you know what, customarily, you would owe me 10% of the annual rent, but this isn't a good situation for you. Let's go ahead and waive that. When you're ready, come back and we'll list again, or give my name to 3 people and I'll talk to them about listing. But you give yourself nothing to work with if you put 0 in there. Then the assumption is 0.
Very generous of me.
I mean, it depends. You have to figure out what, again, we have to understand the motivation. You know, people look at me crazy when I tell them to ask why, but, you know, why do you want to get out of the listing agreement? Why is this the house that you're buying? Why? What happened? What's wrong? What did I do wrong? What are you not happy with? I mean, what's the reason? And I think sometimes if you feel funny in your tummy, there's something going on that you're probably not aware of. And
So
what you're-
there aren't
what you're
any,
grounded.
there aren't any guidelines on this one, or is it always 10% that we're asking for?
That's the minimum we request.
Minimum?
Mhm.
Okay. Or flat fee minimum would be,
Flat fee minimum would be at least $1,500.
okay,
If a flat fee would be commensurate with 1 month's rent is what you would be looking at. So if you're listing a house and you think that the house would rent for $3,500, then I would put $3,500 as a flat fee.
okay. All right, gotcha.
The other paragraph that we want to make sure gets filled in is number 9 when we talk about damages. And this is on the next page, page 7, top of page 7. We've really kind of touched on this, but here's the deal. You're going to invest in the property from the time you list it. You're going to have expenses from the time you list it, even if it's your own time and energy. You're entitled to compensation. If you put 0 in here, and I'll admit, when I was trained to put 0 in here because you don't want the seller thinking you're going to try and come after them for money if they decide they can't sell or if they want to cancel their agreement. I'm going to tell you, my mind has completely shifted from that. I always put something in here. They were willing to pay 6% for my professional services. We're now deciding to cancel our agreement. I've worked hard. At least if I put 6% in here, I can negotiate to 3%. You don't ever want to put anything in here less than what you would have received for your side of the compensation. So if it was a 5% listing, and I would have had a 2.5%, the minimum I would put in there is 2.5%.
Right, I was gonna say, this is 6, so truly it would be more like 3, right? Seller agrees to pay broker.
You were gonna pay me 6% to get it sold. You're backing out.
Oh, I see what you're trying to say.
I had no idea. I have been true to you
So
and
I'm
done
charging
what I
them
would
both sides now.
for damages.
Mhm.
That's what I'm telling them I'm gonna do. There's gotta be skin in the game. So if the seller says, wait a minute, you're charging me 6% if I cancel or if the property doesn't sell? No, I am not charging you anything if the property doesn't sell and our contract expires. But I do have the right to charge you 6% if you back out and don't allow this to move forward based on the terms we've agreed to.
And if it's under contract, that 6% does this, but still buyer and seller?
If it's under contract,
Is that for that, or is it just if you list it, no contracts made?
no, these are damages. So this is if the seller backs out during the contract period. If you're under contract and the seller backs out, that's a default.
Yeah,
Then yes, we can gain or request or go after our full commission. Now, the other brokerage will of course want to go after their portion too, but they're going to come after us. They're not going to go after the seller. Why? Because the brokerage agreement to compensate comes broker to broker through MLS. So they're going to come after us.
This is about if the property is under contract.
No.
It's not necessary.
No.
Or is this just, you know what, it's not someone wants it.
Yes and yes. If you're under contract and they default, that's damages. We're not getting compensated. So we can go back to this paragraph and say, look, you owe us 6%. And agents that argue, you know, well, shouldn't that just be
right,
the half of it?
right.
No, because guess what? If you were under contract and they defaulted, that other brokerage is going to come after us.
Oh.
Not after the seller.
Oh, gotcha, I didn't know that, okay.
Because where does money flow?
And that's what, cause I was wondering,
Brokerage to brokerage.
see, I didn't, okay, now I get it.
So I would always put if the commission is 6%, I would always put 6%.
I believe you should always put 6%.
Because like you said, yes and yes, so
Because the other, okay.
we should put 6%.
So, and if they back out during the contract, you have to evaluate what was the reason, what was the repercussions. If the reason was valid and you feel that we need to go ahead and waive that as damages, then let's talk about it. But if you put 0 in here, you give yourself nothing to work with. Mr. Miss Seller, look, it says 6%, I get it, this is bad. Look, I've added up my expenses, I believe I'm at about $500. Why don't we do $500 and call it a day? Are you good with that? Good with that. Great, fine, thank you. Or, Mr. and Ms. Seller, here's the deal. This is a bad situation. We had no idea that this was going to occur. We're going to go ahead and waive the damages fee, but I'm going to ask you to give 5 cards to the next 5 people you talk to about real estate and recommend it.
I like that better.
And write a review for me. Yeah.
Well,
Okay. I mean, but if you put in 0, where are you going to negotiate? I'd like to negotiate from 0. Where? Down? Now I'm going to pay you? No.
you love this right there.
Yeah. There's-
I still don't see where the other person, the buyer's agent, can sue you when this is when the whole contract just, there's no contract involved here.
This is the contract between the brokerage, us,
Yes.
and the seller.
Correct.
Right.
But I still don't understand how you're saying the other side can sue you, because that's not what this is saying.
Can't answer that one.
Well, this is the contract between the seller and the brokerage. We don't have a contract yet
Right,
for a
right.
buyer.
Right. So that's
So-
why I was still questioning, why wouldn't this be 3 when we would never get 6 out of it? Ever.
Because if you do get sued, you at
Yeah, but
least
sued
have
by
something,
whom?
you know.
The other brokerage.
What other brokerage? It's not,
Because if
it
you say
expired, or, I mean, not expired, they wanna just get out, so nobody else is entitled.
If nobody else is entitled,
Yeah,
so we're talking 2 different situations. One, you're in the middle of a contract and
Oh, in the middle of a
buyer,
contract, I can
excuse me,
see.
you're in the middle of a listing contract.
yes, okay,
And the buyer now, the seller decides now they want to cancel the listing agreement.
right,
You have no idea what your damages are. But if you put only 3% in here, you can only go after them for 3%. Right?
right,
So now, let's say that we are in the listing agreement contract, and now we have an offer from another brokerage that the seller's under contract with.
okay, now I see
And
why.
now
I
the
see.
seller defaults.
Okay, now that's why, okay,
So the seller is defaulting, and you're saying, well, then you only owe me 3% because that's all I would have ever
No, I
been
got
given.
it now.
However, monies flow brokerage to brokerage. So now we're going to be sued by that other brokerage for compensation because the seller defaulted. Why? Monies flow brokerage to brokerage.
oh, I get that part, I was thinking that this
But
was
if you
just
start
limited.
at 3%, if you start at 3%, then when the seller says, I want to cancel this listing agreement,
After they've gotten offers or whatever,
I don't care whether they've gotten offers or not. I'm just saying that using scenario 1, they want to cancel their listing agreement, right? So you're saying, well, they should only be responsible for 3% because that's all I would have been given. Okay, well then negotiate off of the 6% and give them a deal and collect 3.
so is this one of your policies too, the 6%, or is this just?
Our
put it-
policy is that you fill that in,
Okay. Okay,
but have a reason for doing it. If you fill it in at 3% and if you put that in your policies, then when we get sued, you're going to have to come up with the money.
So just match the commission, be on the safe side.
yeah, you're right, except I don't see how they can sue you for, if there's nobody else is involved, just you and the seller.
You're just, the seller and us are involved. They agreed to pay us 6%. They're
Yeah,
now
I know,
defaulting
and
on-
I understand that then we pay the other,
No. When we entered this listing agreement, did we guarantee a contract?
yes.
No, we did not. We did
Oh,
not.
guarantee I thought you meant this listing contract.
This is a contract. This listing agreement is a contract.
Yes,
When we entered into this contract with the seller, did we guarantee that they would get a buyer
No.
and sell their house?
No.
No.
no,
So we have an exclusive right of sale listing agreement
Right.
that states, here's the deal. if it falls apart, or if you cancel, somebody's gonna get paid.
What if it just expires?
Well,
If it
that's
expires-
completely different.
Yeah, so damages doesn't relate to expiration. If the contract expires, then the seller owes us nothing unless within a 12-month period, they sell it to someone who saw the property while we had it listed. If they relist with another brokerage and somebody that saw it while we had it listed now goes in and buys it, we're owed nothing. Once it's listed by another brokerage, we're owed nothing.
But after the listing is expired and someone we showed, literally, we can still go and get commission on that
Correct.
if they hadn't signed up with another brokerage.
Correct.
In other words, they were trying to sell without the,
Within 12 months.
yeah, I didn't know it was 12 months, wow. So you should track that too.
You should.
Let me try.
If you have a listing that expires and you don't feel good about the expiration, you might want to put it on a tickler list in MLS to pop up if it changes hands.
If it
Or
changes
go
hands,
in,
though,
it wouldn't be an MLS, you
No.
wouldn't get compensation.
right,
So
right.
maybe you go back, once a month and you check the MMT to see if it happened to change hands.
yeah, because it wouldn't,
Change hands, like sold it to somebody else, and then they owe you commission, even after it's expired.
If after your listing expires, the seller sells the property to someone that saw the property while you had it listed,
But how do you know? It's,
you have to check tax records.
well, you also
no,
should,
I mean, like, how do you know
who saw the property?
that person actually saw the property during that time?
You're talking about the new owners, not necessarily the agent, right?
Right. So oftentimes you'll find out from other agents who their buyers are.
You should have a sign-in sheet, but they won't all sign, but I see, in other words, you have to track who's looked at
Right.
the home.
And it's usually if you have a bad feeling about the expiration is when you find out that it was somebody else.
This person.
Here's
Or
a
the
photo.
neighbor says, oh, I've walked through your house, when it expires, I'll go in and buy it, and I'll get a little, they have friendship or something going, so then you will be, that's what we're talking about, so that sort of thing. If it expires, they say, wait, I wanna buy your house as soon as your listing expires, I'm your friend, so
Well-
I then have, I can get the commission from them,
From
They
the
have-
original seller, yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
because,
But remember also the exclusive right of sale listing agreement says that anybody that comes to that seller must be referred to the brokerage.
okay, anyone who comes to that seller must be referred to the brokerage.
During the listing period.
What if
So,
it's a friend right down the street and she just comes in and says, I've seen your house a million times, as soon as this comes off, I'm gonna buy
here's
it.
my agent's card, give them a call.
They're not gonna do that though.
The seller's not gonna do that?
No, the seller's gonna go, because I wanna give them a deal, I'm gonna wait till it expires in a month, let's wait a month, and then you can come in and make me an offer.
Well, they just violated the listing contract, therefore they owe us commission.
But I don't think that was the first time that they ever seen the home. If they've seen it every week for the past
Yes,
2 years.
maybe they have dinner over there a million times,
Doesn't matter, once it's listing, it's a contract. The seller's obligation, once the property is listed in a contract, is to refer all inquiries to the listing associate or the listing brokerage.
Okay.
After 12 months, your client comes by and say, I want to buy it, and then I check.
How do you prove that
You
this
said 12 months,
person who, yes, how do you prove that
You
this
said after
person
12
was
months.
Right, so if I have a listing and the listing expires and the seller doesn't list with someone else,
right,
and after 12 months, a buyer comes to them and that buyer saw the property where we had it listed, they owe us no compensation. If that buyer who saw the property during the listing period buys the house during the 12 month period after the expiration, the seller owes us money.
That's what I'm saying. How do we proof that that buyer actually saw the property done. You know what I'm saying? That's.
Listen, my neighborhood,
So
everyone's
you check-
buying like this. They're all doing this, so a neighbor has
But it's
seen that.
not listed.
Well, I'm telling you, these houses are listed, and then 1 month and it's gonna expire. This one said, I'll then buy your house. How do you really prove that they said, okay, it's gonna expire in a month, I'll buy it. I'm in a position now to buy it. I'm your friend, neighbor right down here. I don't wanna pay you won't have to pay the commission. You'll make more money. How do you prove that this is a neighbor? Because my neighborhood is so weird. They're just buying from each other, a lot of them.
Right, but oftentimes a buyer will use an agent they've used before. In other words, where they're going to get the paperwork. So
Yeah.
if they didn't use if they used an agent, then that agent usually puts it in MLS so that they get credit for it, which would make sense. So you can track MLS. If the house changes hands, then what you want to do is go ahead and look in MMT to see if it changed hands,
Yeah.
and then you want to look at the name. And then maybe you go back to a couple of the agents that showed the house during the time you had it listed and check and say, hey, was this your buyer? Was this your buyer? And that's a great way to also see who may have seen the house during the time you had it listed. How do you prove that they saw it when it was listed? You show that they saw the house with that agent during that time period.
Oh.
Well, if it was an open house.
If it was
Making it more cost-
if it was an open house, and I'm there at the open house and I'm the listing agent, then I'm fine because I'm the listing agent that should be representing the person that came in. If someone else is holding the house open for me, then they have the right to that buyer as long as that was the agreement between the listing associate and the agent holding it open. Is it hard to prove that someone bought it that saw it while you had it listed? Potentially, if you don't want to spend a little bit of time. In your case, if you have a listed property and now the seller's saying just wait till it expires and I'll buy it, well, if the brokerage wants to go after that seller, they can go after that seller for the commission. It's that
Even
simple.
though it's just a neighbor who's been, like you said, in and out of this house a million times, they never had to even see it. Or they came through an open house and said, "Oh God, just wait, because
So
we're,
it's
you
just
know."
saying, if your neighbor got in the house before, I'm sure they know what the house looked like.
But
That's what it's saying.
It would be very hard to prove. This is what's happening in my neighborhood. That's what I'm saying. It is happening. They suddenly so and so goes, "Oh, now that
well,
I'm
then
in,
it's up to the brokerage whether they want to go after the commission or
yeah,
not. Again, it's up to the brokerage whether they want to go after the commission or not.
yeah." It's
But
gonna be
the-
tough.
but it's also the seller's responsibility to turn over any inquiries to the listing agent. If they're not doing that, they're in violation of the agreement, and the brokerage can collect the commission.
Oh, okay. So it is the responsibility of the buyer's agent to turn over all the names. Did you say?
Nope, that's
Nope.
not what I said.
Okay, go again.
What I said was, it's if the seller has an inquiry on the property, it's the seller's responsibility to turn
Oh, the
over
seller's
all
responsibility.
inquiries
Okay,
to the listing agent.
okay, seller. Okay.
So they're in violation of the listing agreement.
But how about this? Does the buyer's agent do they have to give you the name at some level? Look they're just going through on Super Key or whatever. Do they, unless you call them, or are they gonna give you the name? Or is that, something you wanna give out, or, do you know what I mean?
In most cases, a buyer's associate's not going to give the name of their
No,
buyers
they're
to a
not.
listing associate.
Yeah,
I mean, but when you're at open houses, if you ask, are you currently working with a realtor? And they tell you, yes, I'm currently working with a realtor. Oh, great, who is it?
yeah, I get
That's
that.
not uncommon. It's not uncommon if you get an offer to say to an agent, is this your customer? If it wasn't provided by the same customer or the same agent that you thought was their customer. I mean, that's courtesy. Say,
Yeah.
weren't you working with? If now they're trying to make an offer through you to see if they can get a deal because you're the listing agent. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
The point of the listing agreement is to ensure that you get compensation from the listing agreement.
Yeah.
So disputes, waiver of jury trial. We remember that disputes are handled, or disputes over monies are handled in a couple of different ways, but it's usually dictated by who's holding the binder. If there are other disputes, the buyer and the seller, or excuse me, the brokerage and the seller are agreeing to waive the jury trial. But if a seller wants to if a seller wants to sue, they can sue for any reason they would like. So it's how the suit is handled, whether it's civil or hybrid. The seller is responsible for disclosing any material defects that may impact the value of the property. This is the exact same paragraph from paragraph 13 in the purchase and sale agreement. So if there's anything that the seller is aware of that could potentially impact the value of the property, they have a responsibility to share that with us. And then we have a responsibility to share it out to the other side, or other sides, or encourage the seller to get it fixed. So either way. Next, the seller is going to disclose to us or confirm with us under line 300, page 7 of the listing agreement, is whether or not the house was built before 1978. Remember, if the house was built before 1978, you need a lead-based paint disclosure. And please make sure it's filled out accurately. It's a $5,000 fine for every error on the lead-based paint disclosure, up to a maximum of $45,000. And it's a one-page document.
And is that something on F-Files? Or is it just?
Lead-based paint disclosure is on F-Files. It's included in listing packages for properties when you're listing a property, or you select a package of listing documents on a property that was built before 1978. It's automatically included in the package. Line 303 talks about, is the property located partially or totally seaward of the coastal construction control line? This is for properties on the
Coast, right?
on the
Water.
on what kind of water?
Coast, right?
Beach.
Or beach, whatever.
Yeah. So this,
Coastal construction.
yeah, only beachfront properties.
Yeah.
Not intracoastal,
You're
not
right.
river, only beach. Paragraph 12 talks about the complete agreement and miscellaneous provisions. In other words, there are no other agreements. Once this is executed, this is the contract between the brokerage and the seller. Any additional addenda that are required should be placed in contract. For example, lead-based paint disclosure, short sale addendum, HOA disclosure, CDD disclosure. Those are all required items. This agreement is not binding unless signed and initialed as appropriate and delivered by and to the seller and the broker. So just like the purchase and sale agreement must be fully executed and to each party within 24 hours, so does the listing agreement need to be be delivered to the seller, and the brokerage needs to have a fully executed copy within 24 hours of execution. Line 315, if any seller is married and the broker has not been notified in writing by any seller that the divorce proceedings are pending, any modification to this agreement and or communication, including without limitation to price changes, extensions, and changes in the MLS from either spouse shall be deemed binding on the other spouse and may be relied upon by the broker. In other words, if a couple is having difficulty and they don't let you know that, and one party calls you and says, reduce it $10,000, and then the other party calls you and is pissed off because you reduced it $10,000, but they never let you know that they're separated or that they're in the middle of a divorce, you still have the right to reduce it $10,000 because it came from one party.
Oh, you do.
Yes. If they've told you that they're in a problem, I shouldn't be doing this, I shouldn't be using my hands like this, not referring to you guys. If the two parties have told you that they're separated, then you have to make sure that whatever the agreement is, that it's between both parties. or that you follow the guidelines that have been outlined by the attorneys who are in the process of negotiating. So you have to make sure you're aware. Down to 330, neither the broker nor the broker's licensees are expert in tax, legal, financial, or property condition. The broker advises the seller to consult with appropriate professionals on these matters. So if they have questions about this document, if they're concerned about anything related to this document or the purchase and sale agreement, tell them that they need to get to a real estate attorney or refer them to one that you know and trust. Just like the purchase and sale agreement, there are additional terms and conditions. If there are any additional terms and conditions that you want to have in your listing agreement, please put them here in paragraph 14. So, can you think of anything? Your $1,000 would go here.
Furniture.
Furnitures would go under personal property, but even furniture should be done as a bill of sale because it's taxable.
How about the PMI? Oh, well, you know, like the seller's gonna give money towards the,
Buyer's closing costs?
yeah,
That would be under closing costs in this.
it wouldn't be like a PMI or something like that, would be here or no?
PMI means primary mortgage insurance in my head.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm thinking of. What's the one where the seller gives the, money towards something?
A seller contribution
Mhm.
towards closing costs?
Is that what it's called? What,
Are you talking about the warranty?
no.
The home warranty?
Home warranty is covered in closing costs also, in the closing costs section of this agreement.
I guess it's probably, that's all gonna be in the mortgage, you're right, probably the mortgage part. They're getting money
So-
from,
If
Oh, right here.
right here, line 58,
there we
the
go.
closing costs.
Okay, that's what I was
So
doing.
if a seller is paying some of the buyer's closing costs, this is where you would write
Okay,
that.
okay, not here, okay,
Or if they
gotcha.
think they're going to pay, or if based on your research, you feel that it's not uncommon for the buyer to request closing costs, then you might wanna put that there, so that they at least understand what the expectation was or what you talked about.
I'm talking like that secondary mortgage that, you know, where, you know, the
Seller's
seller,
willing to provide financing,
yes,
that's a complete separate addendum.
oh, okay. So that
Seller
would not.
financing, we talk about seller financing.
What's the name of that where it's the sellers, there's a initials for that? You know, where the seller, yes, is willing to take back like I don't know if it's a second, but it really isn't a second.
Well,
Primary,
that's called seller financing,
yeah,
and there's a seller financing addendum.
okay. So it wouldn't go in here then, okay.
Well, if the seller would like to offer the option for seller financing,
I thought it was in town.
So in other words,
To
they're
the
paying two mortgages basically, one to the seller, one to the mortgage company. Well, that's in there somewhere, obviously.
where's the FHA? Oh, there we go, there we go, thank you.
Oh,
So right here, if they want seller financing, then you would attach the seller
oh,
financing.
there it is,
addendum.
okay, sorry. I got it now.
Initial all those, please,
No, I got it, there it is.
all the ones on top.
So what else would go in here?
Okay, so any special circumstances? Can you think of any?
Palm trees.
Sago Palm stay. Actually, that still goes under personal property.
Oh, wow.
Because remember, personal property,
That's under personal property.
shrubbery,
Oh,
plants is now installed. So that's there.
Wow.
Here you
That
are.
was not
Thanks,
personal
Dad.
property.
Thank you, dear.
I thought it wasn't a personal property because you attached it to, okay, that's where the personal property attached to the property.
Right. So personal property that stays would be anything that's attached. So the plants and shrubbery are expected to stay. So you're correct. If the seller now wants it, they would put it here under items excluded instead.
That one.
If they wanted to keep them, which you're going to tell them, take them out of the ground, put them in a pot. And then the buyer's going to know that they don't go. Don't leave them in the ground if you want to take them. So anything else you can think of for paragraph 14?
No.
How about
this is just for you.
How about her neighbor?
Oh, my neighbor.
Oh.
I want to exclude my neighbor from this agreement.
Yes, we did that
So
with
if my
ours.
neighbor wants to buy it, I don't pay a commission.
This would be in here. Oh,
So you would put that under additional terms and conditions. I'm gonna tell you right now, if your customer, seller, wants to exclude someone from the listing agreement, you need to limit the amount of time. So if your seller says, well, Margot, the neighbor has said they're interested in buying it, and if they wanna buy it, I don't wanna pay a commission. Great, no problem. Have they provided you with a letter of loan approval yet? No, they're paying cash. Oh, okay, great. Have they given you proof of funds yet? No. Have you asked them for a deadline on that? No. Okay, well, here's the deal, Margot. From the minute this listing agreement signs, I'm gonna start working for you. I don't think I should have to work for free. So I'm willing to exclude your neighbor from the listing agreement, but I'm only willing to do it for 2 weeks. Because here's the deal. If they haven't done it within 2 weeks, they're probably not gonna do it. And if they are willing to do it within 2 weeks, great, you've just got yourself a sale. But I can't continue to market the property. position the
yeah, and
property.
plus you've already put a lot of money into this, so would you also put, for the monies that were initially, you get reimbursed for that?
Well, if it's after the 2 week period, you go back to the damages paragraph.
Well, how about during the 2 weeks? Because right off the bat, you're gonna be
Yeah.
putting stuff
Then
out
you could
there.
write in, exclude my neighbor, person X, within the first 2 weeks. Should they buy within the first 2 weeks, seller agrees to compensate brokerage $300.
Yeah, something like
We
that.
had a situation where maybe wanted to buy it, and then my broker was asking for like 200 people out for, a time and family and all that stuff.
Should be 2 weeks. Oh,
Stuff like
God.
that.
Not-
I mean, I really wouldn't do it for less than, any more than 2 weeks. Excuse me. But remember, this is your business, so if now you've got somebody saying exclude them from the listing agreement, you're just now taking money out of your own pocket.
Yeah.
So, you be the catalyst. If they want to buy it, then give them 2 weeks. You go over there, tell them, look, we've excluded you for 2 weeks. Do it as coming soon for those 2 weeks so you don't have a huge amount of expense. And if they buy it within 2 weeks, great. Ask them for 6 referrals.
I know it would be best to have the deal, but in this case, why don't you just have it in and let me know in 2 weeks?
He was saying if you put it as coming soon, and then if they buy it within that 2 weeks, then you didn't have to, you
But you still have to work, you still have to picture maybe on your phone, you still,
don't have to.
you still have to work. I mean, I know you're a business person.
Okay, so now you say, let's just wait 2 weeks. Let's just wait 2 weeks, and then we'll go ahead and sign. And tonight, I'm out at a cocktail party. I drink a lot, apparently. And I run into Margot. And Margot says, oh my gosh, I've got people looking in your area. And I say, oh, I'm really considering listing my property, but my other neighbor's been interested. Really? Why don't we put a listing agreement together and I'll exclude the neighbor? And now 2 weeks you come back to me and say, okay, well, did they buy? And I say, no, they didn't buy, but Margot agreed to exclude them, so I'm sorry, I went with Margot. And now I lost the listing. You lost the listing.
Yeah.
Because you said, oh, just wait 2 weeks, rather than lock up the listing and use either the waiver of entry or the coming soon or something to lock down the listing. Because you've just lost control. Rather than control the listing,
They're, yeah.
you've given it away.
What else
Lock
would
it
go in
up.
there? What other just common additional terms and conditions have you seen?
I have put in the removal of potbelly pigs a lot.
What? The removal, take them out, like, please take them away?
How many potbelly pigs have I rehomed as a realtor? I don't even know.
Really?
5?
I thought it was like
6?
7 or 8.
7?
So additional terms besides the other ones that are listed, you put in, please, removal of or rehoming
We're about.
the
Okay.
things, right?
Yeah,
Potbelly
rehoming
pigs.
animals.
I thought that Jacob was I was gonna have a potbelly pig in my backyard. The Jacob's one. Jacob Orange's one. Do you remember that
Oh,
one?
Yeah, that's right.
I thought Audrey was gonna give him my address. Here, just drop it off at Jesse's house.
Are these those giant ones? Yeah, they're
So
pretty big.
technically, I guess that should go into personal property, but I guess it could come under additional terms and conditions.
Sorry, I'll go back over here.
But so in addition to
Potbelly pigs and exclusions.
that probably is under other property, but what else would be common to see there that you would be kind of alerted to?
I don't know that there's any common, because most everything is already covered in the
Yeah, I
listing
think
agreement.
so. That's what I
So
had
it would
trouble
be
with this too.
Hard to find something common. It's usually uncommon, and that's why it gets in here under additional terms and conditions.
Okay, all right, okay.
Of course, FIRPTA, that's the foreign investor. Remember, they do have to disclose if they're a foreign investor, and it is at least 10 days before closing that they must disclose. So if the seller was a foreign investor, or if the buyer is a foreign investor. Then we've got our social security numbers, tax ID. It just puts the seller on notice that at some point you're going to have to disclose that. We used to have to write it down into the listing agreement. Receipt, pursuant to the Florida statutes, everybody has to have a fully executed copy of this within 24 hours. And then, of course, we have paragraph 18 where the seller authorizes the brokerage, the closing attorney, the settlement agent to communicate with the seller's lenders, foreclosure attorneys, bankruptcy trustee, everybody involved. This is that other piece that gives you the right to make all the phone calls, making sure that you know what's going on. While I know that there will be a lot of good people working for you and working with you, you still are responsible for making sure everything happens. Then there's our wire fraud. That's always fun. Just remember, I don't recommend doing a lot of wiring unless it's absolutely necessary. Keep your customers on tight constraints if they are going to wire. Then the seller signs. Please make sure you get information from them related to what their future address is so that you can stay in touch with them. If they don't currently have a future address, put in the address of the property you're listing, and then make sure you get the new one when you're ready to go and when they close. You want to be able to stay in touch with them.
Very good. Really, very good.
You guys are really patient. We went an hour over.
Oh, we did?
Must be starting.
Yeah, but this is really good. It's good for me. It's good for
Let's get
everybody.
somebody on the contract.
Now, if we can just do the CMA, I'm completely ready to go, I think. But I'd still
we'll
need
try
your
and-
help a little bit.
We'll try and schedule a CMA class then.
Yeah, just to do an example of a,
Hey, what's tomorrow's topic about?
that's
Seller
a
consult?
consultation, which is actually very good too. You forget
Okay.
this stuff too.
And then, I think that's it, right? That's what
It's for the last class.
It is.
Alright.
Oh, can you turn that off? Just push the button over there on the far left. I got it. Never mind.
Where's your button?
All right. Sorry. I'm giving you the proper instructions anyway.